Hello.
Good afternoon.
It's always good to join the stream while the countdown is running, right? Because I'm late. So what is the topic about today? It's my day today, so
What's your day
I
today?
shall not ask, right?
Yeah, we had this idea of having Jonathan on for 3D and Go tomorrow and having something PWA related today. But from our Friday stream that we sort of experimented with last week, you ended up sort of exploring an old code base, and you and I paired, and we, after rewatching ourselves go through the show, we noticed that hey, this looked
we
much
shouldn't
more.
do this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
this
we
looked
should.
much more like a legacy
We
code
should.
base struggling with quality rather than us just having a simple demonstration. And there were
There are
clearly
some
some
broken
things.
windows, right?
There were some broken windows there, yes. So we clearly stumbled upon those mistakes that we often talk about, and you happened to just unrelated have this broken window theme on your newsletter. So I figured Jonathan had to postpone, and you just jumped onto the topic straight away, so I figured let's do a double take on it.
Yeah.
Let's go over the business side today, and tomorrow we actually going back into the code base and explore, refactor, and most importantly, add some test to the code base that we thought we understood and could easily navigate, and it turned out it has more rough edges than we thought.
In all fairness, I thought I understood. So I was thinking that, hey, I don't know, it was 1 year ago or something like that where I was writing first time, and I had it entirely different in my remembrance, right? So it's a little bit, my memory was just telling me, hey, there was it's a great piece of kit there. There's a good code base. We can just put some more features into that. But it was just a prototype, and I have saved it in my memory as a pretty good, decent code base, but it wasn't. And my mistake, actually the mistake was to not prepare myself for this one. I would just jumped into it, and actually, let's say we did a good show on Friday, but it was more about exploratory refactoring and repairing a code base, which was interesting as well, of course, but it was not the actual topic. And this is the reason why we will do that next week. And I'm while basically, or in the meanwhile, I'll basically fix the main issues in this code base, because I think that the idea was to show something about PWAs, modern technologies, how we can build those things, as a celebration that we still have PWAs, right?
From Apple having reverted their decision to ditch PWA on the home screen in the EU because of
DMA.
And
since we don't want to have 3 sessions of refactoring, I do that next to that, while in my free time, and then we do that next week with real features. I will quickly show, let's say 10 minutes about what we've refactored, just to have a link between the last session. Yes, that's actually it. But today we talk about broken Windows, and we talk about, it's not about the Microsoft, OS. It is not about that, even though people suddenly, I don't know, I had already 3 people asking me about that. But no, the broken window effect or theory is about, it's not about OS, it is about, it's a theory in the criminology.
Oh, I see it now.
You haven't understood it as well, or what?
No, but I see it now, because we used, I get it now, because the background color, the background image that we used. So hang on. Wait, hold on. No, it has like the window itself. Hold on, how can I make it more?
Okay, it looks like the 4 squares.
It uses the color scheme of Windows, and then you can see the. Can I move you? No, I can't move you. But now I can see it on the background. The color scheme, the color screen, the color scheme is very, very similar to that of Windows. So I figured, okay, yeah. No, that wasn't. That was completely unintentional. We're talking, of course, about the. It's in your article. Let me spin it up, because
I have it.
You inspired me to write as well.
Wait a second. Share it.
So it's a quote from James Wilson and George Kelling. Yeah, that's one.
I think I have the quote up here, right?
Yeah, the first broken window is the signal that no one cares, and so breaking more windows costs nothing. This goes back to a study where it shows that if you have a house with a broken window somewhere in your neighborhood, if it's not repaired, the value of the houses in that neighborhood will go down, because people will think it's abandoned, so it will increase crime rate, and etc., right? So having a broken window literally on the streets in a city or in a suburb has an effect of then snowballing this decrease in that case land value, or at least the perception of decrease of land value, which then becomes actual decrease in as far as the banks are concerned, or the real estate, the realtors are concerned. In software, what's the equivalent, Adrian?
The equivalent is this is what
it's not the operating system. So what's broken?
So it is not like if you make one Windows bad, the next one will be bad as well. It is not about this. it is a little bit
Not
like
intentionally.
no, it's not intentionally, but maybe there is a connection. We'll find out today. So it is about that you start with a pristine code base. You start with motivation. You have intrinsic motivation in the beginning. Everyone is like, yeah, let's go. And then I have that as well when I'm joining fellowships and I see fresh teams, which are just right now we're basically assembled in front of me, right? And they are all like, yeah, let's go, we will do that. And after, the first iterations already, they come into this stress, right? There are like people coming and say, or stakeholders coming and say, okay, deadline is changed, we need to get this earlier, or we need to put in between this feature. And suddenly everything which was comfortable in the beginning is not so comfortable anymore. And this cuts in budget, time. You have less time. Maybe you already created some tech debt because you decided to, maybe we need to do something differently. We haven't thought about that, right? And
It sounds like you're describing a project that goes from greenfield to brownfield to then becoming legacy.
Yeah, basically in just some month. And the point is that this all leads to shortcomings or shortcuts in this case. So in order to try to keep up, to meet those deadlines, to adapt to the new circumstances, which are quite negative, you start to shortcut. You say, we can just have a shallow test. Maybe we can leave a test out entirely. Maybe I don't need to talk to my colleagues how we implement it. I just do that very quickly now. So
we can do tests tomorrow. And
exactly, a little bit like the code base we showed on Friday, which was more the type of a prototype, which is okay for a prototype, but not for a production thing. And the thing is, if you have those shortcuts, right? If they stack up, this is like a shortcut is like a broken window. It leads to some form of code smell, to some to-do in your application, which doesn't seem very harmful, but sometimes those to-dos can be severe because they become permanent. Code will be duplicated, you build up on this, but the foundation is not done yet. And the point with the broken window effect, the actual effect is that if you have that, one time or on one spot and someone sees that and needs to work in a similar spot may think that it's not done anyway there, so I don't need to take care as well because no one cares, right? So we need to take shortcuts. So your inner resistance, your ego will tell you, I can do the same, so it's covered already by. And if you have
Adrian's not right. We said we should write tests. And Adrian was very strong on writing tests, but Adrian isn't writing tests, so why should I write tests, right? So it's
exactly relativation. So we relativize this statement inside our head. Is it actually a word?
I don't know.
I actually that was a hot translation.
Relativize. It is an actual word. Make or treat as relative or dependent on something else. I don't think this word is used.
Okay. It's actually used in German quite often. Relativierung, we call it. But
Relativierung.
So basically what your brain is doing for you in this moment is telling you, it's okay to do that as well. So a negative effect.
So you're creating evidence that your bad behavior is justified. So you create justifications.
Exactly, because someone else did before. And even if this is to blame, then the other person is to blame before you.
So it's like saying I will work out.
In your brain. Exactly.
It's like saying I will work out once a week or every once a day, and then today it's okay to quit. I'll double work out tomorrow. I'll make up for it tomorrow. And then because it was okay today, maybe it's a little bit more okay tomorrow. And then you're like, okay, well, I quit yesterday, so maybe I just take it easy today and maybe don't do it again.
On some point
I'll make it up on the weekend.
Exactly. On some point in time, it becomes default. So it is okay. So it is or let's say it can become part of your engineering culture.
Yeah.
And I
have a great advice here, and it's actually from somebody outside of tech, a quite rugged gentleman called Jocko Willink. Jocko is a ex-Navy SEAL. It's a decorated officer in the U.S. Marine Corps, and he is now coaching leadership skills in large organizations in the U.S. And one of his mantras for this kind of advice is, if you have to quit, if you feel like you have to quit, lay it off. Quit tomorrow. Right? So rather than saying, "Oh, I will do this tomorrow. I don't want to do this today. I will do it tomorrow." Flip it around to quitting. Say, "Oh, I don't want to quit today. I'll quit tomorrow, and today I'll do it." And that is, as silly as it sounds, very effective. Very effective, because I use it as well with my kids when they don't want to do something. And I'm like, "Yeah, we can skip it tomorrow, but today we're doing it." Right? If it really helps with an objection, and I've been playing around with it in coaching sessions as well. When somebody objects to this, "I don't want to write tests today. We have all this work going on." I say, "Okay, well, let's skip it tomorrow, but today let's follow procedure." And usually the next day, then this feeling goes. It isn't even present anymore, so they don't even take advantage of this skipping it tomorrow.
So in my favorite book, which is Raoul, are you here? Which is my favorite book. He will tell you probably.
It's there on the shelf.
It's
don't say it. Raoul will
I don't say it, but Raoul will, and we'll show that. But the point of the author there is that you find thousands of things you can do instead of doing what you really should do. You know exactly what you should do in that moment. Every software developer does know what it is to do in that moment. But we find so many reasons, so reliably, that convince or try to convince us very effectively to not to do that in that moment. It is time concerning. I don't get my stuff done. Others will be mad at me. I don't have time. I don't know how. I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to show that I am not able to do that right now. I don't want to ask other people. And there's so many things going on. But in the moment, you sit down and do it. Just do it. In that moment, everything is okay. It is from this to that moment, all the negative aspects in your head are just gone. As you said in your example, it is simply not there anymore. This is just a psychological projection that this is possible. For example, TDD is more of an effort and takes longer to build an application than like without it, right? And this is actually not true. This is just a projection in your head because you save time in the beginning and you have large problems in the end. So you actually don't get to the finish line. And this is what actually, your inner resistance trying to do with you, which is so bad. You shouldn't do this. And this is about the broken window theory. You get one to another, and on some point you have so many broken windows that no one is taking care anymore at all. Where's Raoul today? What's going on?
We have some. Who's here if Raoul isn't here? Maria, hello. It's good to see you. And Maciej? Masej? Absolutely. We're talking about legacy systems here, and particularly legacy code bases. So surprisingly, that idea of projections in your mind, that's actually very strong. Because, think of it, your mind creates a lot of constructs, right? A lot of your memories are actually constructs created by your mind. You haven't actually experienced them, right? So, and you can easily experiment with this, where if you have a memory of you watching yourself do something, that is a construct. Because obviously you haven't observed yourself doing something unless you're watching a video recording of yourself, but you probably don't have a strong memory of doing something important and then watching yourself do it, right? So, and you might have a lot of such memories where you observe yourself doing something, or you remember yourself watching yourself from a third person. Depending on how visual of a memory you have, it might be slightly different for you. You might not be using words, you might not be using imagery, you might be using other senses. But whenever you have a construct that you mistake for a memory, try to go back and remember, why do you believe this, and why, and how is this memory serving you, right? Because when it comes to what you just said, TDD will slow me down. It's possible you've never actually said that out loud, but you might be thinking it as an obvious fact. So So go back to that construct and ask yourself, who told me this? Like, why did I start adopting this mantra, and how is it serving me? Right? And the obvious answer might be, oh, because obviously then it prevents me from entertaining the idea of even trying TDD. Or maybe it protects me from something evil like TDD, but then the question is like, why is TDD evil? And then you try to look into it and sort of do like sort of reverse psychology with yourself. Like, why do I believe this?
Start to question yourself is part of becoming self-aware, and self-aware persons develop a very, very, very important skill set over time, which is being aware of that actual resistance happens. And this is the point where you actually can do something against that. So I see so many posts about procrastination.
Yeah.
The key to overcoming procrastination is to be aware of the consequences of it. And if you are not aware of, instead you say, or you have the feeling that watching Netflix, not just for a recreation time in the evening hours, but doing that the entire weekend for the next 2 weekends to come. And you are not able, you don't have the competence for yourself to determine if this is right or wrong. Then actually you have something, and which is actually quite well taught in that book as well. You are not a professional person in that moment. You don't have control over yourself. So you cannot in that moment
You're being very impulsive.
You can't take responsibility for other things if you can't do that. So the first thing to become a responsible and mature person who's able to take ownership is to become aware of your negative downsides, and you actually fool yourself here and there. And we all do that. No matter how far you get into this game, you still do that. There is still something in you which is doing that constantly. The resistance is constantly coming. No matter how successful you beat it on day one, on the second day, you stand up in the morning and you get those ideas of, oh, maybe you do something different. No. In that moment, you need to be like, I know what happens. I'm aware of that. I'm getting over it right now. There was this.
It's how I am when I have to report my taxes. Every time, when it's tax season, I'm like, am I doing it today? Am I doing it tomorrow?
There is this American admiral, I forgot his name, and he told the first thing you should do after standing up, no matter if you are a rich person, a poor person, a lazy person, or an eager person, it doesn't matter. Make your bed. Clean up your bed. This is the first little thing you can do. It takes less than a minute to do, and you have something accomplished on this day already. And this is so true. It is about getting things done. In that moment, I mentioned before that as soon as you sit down and get to your work, get to your profession, in that moment, everything is fine.
Sounds like Jordan Peterson, but I believe you're referencing a Harvard address by Admiral McRaven. I believe
it was a modern thing. It is not Eisenhower. It is.
I think William H. McRaven. He was
I can't remember. It was
United States Navy 4-star admiral.
It was, it's exactly, and it was about making bed, in the morning, and this is so important.
Yeah, he wrote the book "Make Your Bed."
Yeah, okay, then probably.
Yeah, The Wisdom of the Bullfrog.
Yeah.
I know the story, The Wisdom of the Bullfrog, where he talks about this idea of in the morning, like start your day by swallowing the frog, right? So you have this thing that you want to avoid, and you're putting off doing it in the morning. So you do snacks first, right? So you're deliberately avoiding the frog, and then you're just distracting yourself with, I will open up my emails, and maybe there's something important in my emails, and I have to check if there's some emergency somewhere in the world, and I check.
You could have won in the lottery, maybe.
And I could have won the lottery, and oh my God, I need to.
I tried it daily,
and and then you don't eat the frog. And he says, like, first thing in the morning, like, make your bed and do the task that you dread doing that day, because that will make you much more productive. And it's the same thing in software with refactoring, with adding tests. And I observed this last time on Friday, where you kept saying this phrase, and sorry for putting you on the spot, but I just heard this phrase sort of come up every now and then of, and this, I don't like this, how it's done like now, like we will refactor it later, and then at a third time, I sort of jokingly even told you, like, stop promising me that you'll refactor this, right? Because now is a good time to refactor it, and we're not refactoring it, right? And
so the question we should ask ourselves, Dennis, is streaming 2 times a week as software engineers who could do some productive work actually procrastination, or is that something productive?
I think it is productive, because
sometimes is it resistance speaking, or is it yourself?
No, because sometimes I have resistance to showing up for the stream or to setting them up or to show, so it requires discipline. So it does feel, it does feel that we are sort of past or approaching this going pro moment with the streams. So I think energetically speaking, emotionally speaking, we're following the right pace. But of course, we can always do some surveys to our audience to figure out whether there's some feedback that we might be avoiding. There are possibly elements there. We constantly get comments about what day they are, how long they are, how technical they are, how non-technical they are, right? So our audience is not homogeneous, even though we have a very strong core of regulars. But yeah, it's an interesting question. What do you think in the audience? Anjana, hello. He says it's productive. You're helping people from learning from those who have been there and done that. There we go. Yeah. There's your answer. Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's the the extroverted part. So we actually helping others, right? For ourselves, I can speak for myself that this is for me like an extended break. So I actually work after that still for several hours. I work too much, to be honest. I'm working too much, I know that. But I try to keep my working hours. I know how much I need to actually work to stay productive. Mm-hmm. Even if it is actually something which is actually hurting me, because sometimes it's really long, right? But I still get it done, because even if it takes on weekends, because the point is, as soon as you let it break in, it becomes normal. It is the same as the broken window effect again. Mm-hmm. So when you say it one time, okay, today you just, a little bit earlier, then it's very hard next day to stay for longer. Mm-hmm. So of course you can then say, then try to, do every day the same, right? But if you want to push forward, it's a little bit hard, which is the reason why I tend to be a little bit, let's say, more in everything. Writing a newsletter Sunday morning and having, some video things to do during
like video editing and writing are definitely things that I have to do in the morning. Like that's my eating the frog moment. Like I have to write in the morning. I can't put it off, because then I just end up writing one paragraph, one sentence, an hour, and then just dragging on. And I don't want to step away from the computer until I have a page written. And it's really, I have a process list now, and step one for writing is always get in state. Right? Mm-hmm. So I need to get in state. If I'm in the state where I don't want to write, then my first step is to getting into state, rather than doing something else, hoping the state will go away or fix itself. It requires deliberate practice. So I have a morning ritual, and sometimes it goes better, sometimes it goes worse, but the consistency is key. Sometimes I have to stop writing. Sometimes I have to say, okay, I have to actually deliberately step away, go out for a walk, and then I come back with some fresh ideas. Sometimes I just write down the ideas and then just have to come back to them.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. Having so many people still have voice recorders with them, or notebooks or something like that, where they can quickly just, some words. It's already enough to remember the context often.
Yeah. That's the hardest part, yeah, because you will remember a title, you remember a phrase, but you will remember that sort of underlying idea, that state, the feeling that you had when you had it. The same thing with refactoring. Sometimes refactoring a code base is difficult, because you might have to juggle many things in your head, and then you're like, well, how can I decouple this without making a mess? And maybe that moment of clarity comes to you when you feel like you can't act on it, and then you just, if you fail to write it down, then it lasts forever. then it's really hard to recover that.
I'm actually riding bike to the office, which is half an hour one way. And during that time, I have a lot of ideas. And I haven't found a solution yet to write down those ideas because I need to, sometimes I really, I stop every some kilometers, right, to write down things. And then I drive on. Maybe I need to create an app.
Yeah, I have my best ideas between workout, shower, and first coffee. But the moment I sit down, so I use the first coffee as a productivity tool. I make my coffee in such a way in the morning that I can sit down and enjoy the coffee while I'm working on the frog. And by the time I sit down with the coffee, all the good ideas are already gone. Right, so I have to have a really good regimented system of, I was working out, I spaced out, I zoned out, and then I had an idea. I have to write that down and then continue working out. Right, so or I go under the shower and I come out. I have to deliberately tell myself, okay, write down puff, 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 and then continue getting ready. Right, so it's very important not to say, I'll write it down later, because I might remember that I need to write it down, but I might actually forget what it was that I need to write down. So that's one aspect. Tor, if you don't know Tor is like this personal brand. He's an indie game developer. Hello, Spanish crew, by the way, if you're here with us. We also have a group of game developers from Spain who are regulars in the book club. So Tor from Pirate Software, he has sort of made a name for himself because he started streaming on Twitch. We're streaming on Twitch as well, by the way. Hello, if you're watching on Twitch. And he started doing YouTube shorts, and he got very good at doing them. And he basically made his stream a profession. Similar to you, he works many hours. He found his ikigai. He found his purpose. He found his mission. He integrated it in a healthy way with all aspects of his life. And he made it his sole focus. So he doesn't half-ass around, but he made it his focus. And he's very deliberate. He has a schedule and everything. And one of his shorts...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and one of his shorts was about this, about a lot of people who say, I want to try something new, or I want to try some new business idea, or I have this idea for a game, or I want to code something, or I want to learn a new framework at work, or I want to try some new approach, or I want to try TDD. A lot of these people, they are so close to trying, but they are seeking permission from something. They're seeking permission from a book, from somebody like us that gives them authority, from their project manager, from their product manager, from their CEO, from their engineering manager, from their mentor, from their tech lead. They're just one not even permission per se, but just support. Just one person saying, yeah, you should do that. And then they would do it, right? So, and I'm aware that we also have that level of power over people, unwillingly, accidentally, just by virtue of putting ourselves here on stage in front of a large audience. There are 50, 60 people watching us live right now. I just want to comment on this, that if you need permission, to try something like TDD, to try refactoring, to really go and refactor something important, even if it comes from us, like, I give you permission right now. Like, I would support you in this. And if you have issues, try doing it and then see where it stops, and then come forward with questions, because that's much better. Rather than saying, I won't even start because I have all these questions. Just start and then stop at the first question and then bring us the question.
Step by step, iterative.
Yeah, because we do support you. That's why we're here. And so the key takeaway on that is, for me, extreme programming and specifically pairing and mobbing, or ensembling as it's known in the UK, is so powerful, because you are pairing with that person who can give you permission, who can give you support. It's like, I think I should refactor. And I see us do that a lot on these streams as well. It's like, I need to refactor. It's like, hang on, let's refactor now. If you think we need to refactor, let's refactor now, right? So that support happens live as you're coding. Copilot can't do that for you. ChatGPT can't do that for you. It requires a human person there with you, seeing that you're procrastinating, that you're avoiding something, to give you that push. Yeah.
Okay, we have an agenda today. I would say we respect the agenda. So first of all, Raul, nice to see you. You weren't asking an important question in the beginning of the stream, which I assumed you weren't there. So maybe you can answer it right now. What was the book I was mentioning beforehand? Even if you weren't there, you know the answer. Maybe you can write it and I can show it. Okay, I'll quickly show some well-prepared Sublime text, right? So it is the agenda for today. It is just the notes we had. So it is nothing very, let's say, detailed, because everything we do here is very live, right? And we want to talk about those rough things today and how they actually, or what they have to do with the broken window effect in software development, right? So defining quality and learn what matters. This is actually the fourth point we want to talk about today. So defining quality and learn what matters. Yeah, what is that? So first of all, defining quality. This is something I really love to talk about. I think most people know already, because I learned when I was basically in technician or engineering school. I learned what quality really means, right? So I really needed to spend some time learning how you define qualities, how you measure it, how you actually think about quality in terms of. And if you don't do that, and if you have never done that, then you think of quality like, oh, high quality, right? High quality is good. High quality is not good. High quality is over engineering. Low quality is under engineering. Quality is what you want. There is no multiplier or some adjective in front of that. It is just quality. You define something, and this is your definition, and this is a requirement, and this is the quality, sometimes called non-functional requirement in software development, which are the qualities. So you say, I want to have a specific level of maintainability, which is a quality. Then you need to meet it. This is the point. You need to meet it. You don't need to over-engineer. You should not. But you should avoid to under-engineer. So it's always better to a little bit hit above the target instead of below that. So this is first of all, what is quality? This is quality, right? So quality is not high quality. So if someone asks you, what is your quality? We only do high quality. We are great craftsmen. No. That's not about it. If you do great high quality, you over-engineer, you are not a good craftsman, right? And it's about not a good engineer. You need to hit the quality. It's
about expectations, right? So you have to define your expected level of quality, and high quality is quality that exceeds expectations. If that came at very low additional cost, then that might be attributed to be a additional benefit.
But we have the peripheral principle, so it is actually not like this.
Yes.
So especially the last 20% often cost 80%, and this is the problem which we should not.
A lot of trade-offs, a lot of scaling problems in software follow power law distributions, not linear distributions, which means that your sense of averages and middles and medians of things don't make sense because they do not make sense in power law distributions.
Exactly. You need to get to the point where you actually make everyone happy. This is the point. And this is where you should set your qualities. So this is what matters, right? So if you have a client, if you have users which you need to satisfy, this level of satisfaction, where you get the most value out of satisfaction, this is your quality, your target. It is not above, because this is too expensive and may keep you away from maintaining that or actually reaching the goal because you put too much time into that. And you should not go below, because your business might end because of this. And there are so many aspects to that. But what matters is learn how to define the quality and learn how to follow the quality. So now, what does this point have to do with the broken window effect? The broken window effect means that once you start with taking shortcuts here and there, a broken window, then a next broken window is more likely than the one beforehand. On some point, you have a lot of graffiti on the wall as well, which wasn't there before. And people coming along, and then you see, okay, basically, no one is mowing the grasses anymore, right? So you
It's
have
abandoned.
it's abandoned. So and the more people on some point say,
It starts
oh, it's
depreciating in value because somebody is literally not appreciating it.
and on some point you come to the point, and this was in interesting part in the blog post. I have not opened it. So,
While you find the blog post, I'll read one of Raul's comments. Raul mentions, Dennis, sometimes while working, we had situations with, I'm assuming project managers and engineering managers that complained if you're innovative or dedicate time to learning/helping people. That sucks. Well, I would raise a question here. If you know that they will complain, how do you choose to respond when they complain? Do you stop your behavior? Because there are alternatives. But if you stop your behavior that you think is helpful when they complain, that's on you, not on them complaining. Right? So think about that for a moment. Like, what are alternatives of your behavior, of your response when they do complain? Why are they complaining?
I would like to say something about that because unfortunately I have this still today, you know, especially when it comes to tension between business and development. I'm actually writing a lot about that and speaking a lot about that, but this sounds for me like the same area of problem. And the point is that on some point, and I say this now as CTO, or let's say actually former CTO, but I've done that for 15 years. And the main thing I always tackled was try to get those both worlds together on some point to ease out the tension between those. So I'm quite comfortable with doing that. And I know out of own experience that is simply not always possible. That is simply, so you can ease it out and you can get into some mode where you can protect, for example, the engineering department, or protect the business or something like that. But this is already you can for example, this is a little bit going into the direction of what Raul was just saying, that you try to be innovative. So you try, for example, you want to implement agile, you want to implement lean principles, you want to implement TDD, for example, right? And people say, oh no, we don't have time and budget for testing, right? Please don't be that innovative. We don't have time, get done now. So we need to get done now. And this is the point. So you have a hard constraint, and it is, let's say, oftentimes engineering departments, software developers and individuals are very, let's say, it's a little bit intimidating what happens there, which means that what can you say if there is no frame for what you want to do, no boundary, no, let's say no space where you could do something, then you tend to follow that, which leads then again to the shortcomings, to the shortcuts, to the broken window effect, because you are the loser in two ways. First of all, you don't have control over the situation. You need to follow someone who doesn't care about your problems. They just, it's your problem. You go and create more problems, and you are the responsible person for the problems to come, but you can't do something about that. Go ahead.
Those are point 2 and 3, actually, on our bullet points on the agenda, from prototyping to production and from craftsman to engineer, because they follow similar cadences. And it's actually highlighted very well in the book, Raul, Planning Extreme Programming. We covered it in the book club last month. By the way, this month in the book club, we're reading Team Topologies, if you're interested. There's a link in my newsletter footer that is evergreen if you want to join. Just as a quick announce. So Planning Extreme Programming covers this very well. The project has constraints, and the project is made up by a team, and the team has business people making business decisions, and technical people making technical decisions. And the project will have technical constraints, and it will have business constraints. When this conversation that you outlined happens, it's technical people saying, I have technical constraints. I want to deal with my technical constraints at the consequence that I want to loosen the product constraints or the business constraints. Where the business people say, no, I have business constraints, and actually they've gotten so bad that now I want to loosen technical constraints. right? So it's this back and forth of I want to win and I want you to give, and you say no, I want to win because my testing stack hurts, and I want you to give by less requirements, less scope, less priorities, moving the deadline, etc., etc. And you can never win this because technical people need to make technical decisions based on business constraints, and business people need to make business decisions based on technical constraints, right? So it doesn't happen by isolation and then wanting to win at the cost of the other side, but you have to adopt the other side's problems and vice versa. You have to say, I will make technical decisions that will make sense for the business, and the business will make business decisions that will make sense for the engineering org. Only this overlap. And ideally, you get so good at this that one of these people on the team, the business expert or the tech lead, become obsolete. And you get a chief engineer of some kind, that's more strategic or more tactical, depending on which one gave in. And ideally, you end up with one person who makes both decisions. These are like very good product companies are notorious for having a chief of product and technology or a VP of product and engineering, right? So
this is the CTPO, right?
Or the CTPO, exactly, where the org has shrunken its innovative department to the degree that one person can understand the business decisions while having enough technical experience to make the best engineering decisions. Look at the Fortune 500s. Most Fortune 500s in the top 10 of the stock market were founded by programmers.
But you are already at the side where the solution is implemented. So the question is more like, how do we get there? And I think, personally, I don't go and say, hey, we are on LinkedIn, we're doing social media stuff. I wrote that several times that, you influencers. I don't see myself as one. But you say just something which is not applying to the real world, right? And this is the reason why I want to be real now. It is very important to understand that this problem is not always solvable in a company. Sometimes you as a software engineer, and if you count yourself as an engineer and not just a craftsman, just a programmer, coder, an engineer who's taking responsibility for the project, the process, the environment, the people around you, the long term, right? If you are this person and you see that the business is, no matter what you do, fighting against you and try to forbid the work you want to do, then you can do two things, right? And if you have basically already proved that even if you practice extreme programming in that moment, and it doesn't help because the pressure is more and more coming towards you. This is possible. I see that very often. You have two choices. You can say, I'm an engineer, I don't accept that. What happens is they might force you to go. Then you should, in my opinion, if you have the freedom to do that, you should consider this. Because it won't get better for you, even it will get worse for you. Because on some point, they will actually, it can become even to the point that they sue you. I saw that already, that people or companies sue engineers for problems the company and the business was actually the reason, the root cause for. And this is what I mean by that. And the other
requesting
thing is,
legal damages by not paying out salaries or by requesting.
And the other thing is to not think about that, but start to become very resistant to the business and really say no. This is not working. I don't work like that. I can't take responsibility. If you want to do that, please give me a contract and basically free me from every consequence. Which will happen because I say now this and that will happen, which is quite easy to predict. Actually.
But now, as a coach, I've been in situations like half of my clients are in this situation, which is why I love doing what I do because I coach exactly these kinds of situations. I coach people who are exposed to these kinds of situations, and oftentimes they have this sort of wake up, sort of this moment of, oh, okay, I should have done this a long time ago. Because now I see how it doesn't make sense. And it has to do with point number 2 on the agenda, going from prototyping to production. When you're building a prototype, the only sensible pathway for the prototype, the most common scenario for a prototype is to say, I will build this prototype to prove something about our business strategy. You should never be using a prototype to prove to yourself that you are able to code the prototype. That is a proof of concept. That is not a prototype. You build prototypes for product ideas to verify whether it makes sense building something from a business perspective, not from a technical perspective. Sometimes there are, but it's rare. It's rare that you would prototype something for technical reasons. You build prototypes to make sure, I have this idea, I think people will sign up, and I think conversion rates will be this and this, and we need to make at least, the landing page needs to get at least this many people for this to make sense. You build a prototype, and then you check whether you're in the ballpark area of those numbers. That's the idea. It's not scalable, but it will prove to you, it will give you hard data, it will give you evidence to then make better decisions. Because when you're implementing features, you need to already be prepared with product questions. But you are building something in order to answer, in order to foster data for your product leaders. And your product leader might not have the title product leader. Your product leader might be your tech lead. Your product leader might be your CEO. Your product leader might be your salesperson. Your product leader might be your second founder or your founding engineer. They can be anywhere. And they shouldn't have a title. Your product owner, by virtue of what a product owner does, especially in the Scrum Master and product owner, product manager titles in Scrum and Certified Agile, they are certainly not the product leader because they are not empowered to make product decisions. They're just a secretary. If you read Fred Box's book from the late 70s, early 80s, they even had this idea that you will have a chief engineer, a senior engineer. They will have a junior for pairing. They will have a secretary for documentation, etc., etc., etc. But they would essentially be a product leader. They will decide what needs to be written. They will have experts who are experts in the language, who are experts in the mainframe, who are experts in the hardware, consulting them so that they can write code. And if you look at the most open source sort of technical specialty communities, like the Linux kernel community, they work exactly like this. They have very hard problems. They have a huge community of people who submit PRs but don't have the technical knowledge or don't have the language knowledge or don't have the driver or hardware knowledge to really go through. So it requires collaboration. They have some kind of digital secretary, the digital VA that helps them go through the pull requests, to sort them, to prioritize them, to triage them, etc. And if you're in this position in your business, it's very likely that you're not building something because it's a hard requirement. You're building something because you are a downstream process of a product leader who is blocked in making a decision because they don't have enough data. But the point isn't the software that you have to build. The point is giving that software to somebody to use so that they can produce those data points. And that's those are points number, going from prototyping to production and from craftsman to engineer. Once you understand that that's why you're writing code, in most cases, especially in small to medium businesses and startups and scale-ups, you will adopt this going to production as an engineer stance of, it doesn't have to be perfect. I just need something in order to answer this question, whatever the question is, I think this will get conversion rates up to 7%. It's 4% right now. That's a good question to have. I will build something. And I will build something that satisfies all the constraints that we've set, even the timeline, even the budget, even the team's technical capability, and then go and try to answer that question. So and we will not act on lack of data.
Translating that back to Raoul's concern, it's actually like you need to bridge the gap between.
Yeah, let me put it back on screen.
Yeah, bridge the gap between business and engineering, which is actually the hard part, and which is often something you need to do long term. As you said before, you need to start early with good practices. This is what you can do. You asked me, but I haven't answered that. You can practice, let's say, as an engineering team, inside already into that direction. So you can do Agile, you can do You can make sure that that the actual software is well delivered, that you can deliver often, that you report often, and build up trust to soften the barrier in between you and the business and include them more into the processes. And this is what you were just talking about. Prototyping, getting feedback is exactly that, right? So the entire engineering is about the process and the product, which means the product is more the business concern. So you as a software engineer are actually on the business side.
Yes.
And this is often the problem. So we can say that, and now we are at the third point, which is actually quite interesting, is that the companies where I see that problem severely is, let's say, where this problem is actually big, yeah? We mostly have just people who see themselves as good craftsmen, master crafts, very good in coding, very good in applying programming to to your idea or something like that. So in actually executing tickets, right? So the typical programmer, this is where people see themselves. A lot of them oftentimes isolated, so different opinions and not streamlined and stuff like this. But what is then the engineer? The engineer is basically the same person, just a person who is not focusing on the introversion, which is myself, my coding, my skills, my code, my blame, blah, blah, blah.
Me.
It is the extroversion. Is that actually a word? But it sounds good. And this is about the process. So can I make complex code so simple that someone with lower skills than me can work on that? This is engineering. This had nothing to do with craft. So if I just program my stuff, I just write it down. But if I engineer, I try to improve. So engineering is about improving constantly, long-term, in iterations, to create a great product and process. So this is what engineering is. And you need to become an engineer in order to become a business person, because the engineers are actually business engineers. We call ourselves software engineers somehow, but in reality, we build a business product. So we cannot be excluded from business in order to do that effectively. So what I said before, that you're actually in the position where you can't bridge the gap anymore. It is most often the case where we have too much craftsmen, too much isolation, too many introverts fighting against business people, and everyone is blaming each other and says you are ignorant.
Yeah.
And the
Just
point
pointing
is that,
fingers across the boundary.
If the software people act like engineers, so try to focus on the outside, the business people will see that over time, because for example, continuous delivery is an engineering practice, right? You instead of giving once a month an update to the business person, you do that every day, even if they don't look at it. But they see you doing constantly things. You're doing constantly progress. They simply cannot say that you have done nothing.
And here I want to push back slightly on sort of this idea of giving updates. You don't want to continuously give updates on the promises you're making, right? So when you give an estimate, I would urge you to stop giving estimates, right? Because you're talking about speculative future. Like when you're in the stance of habitually talking about speculative future, you need to get that conversation back down to the present and ideally to the past, rather than saying, "Oh, tomorrow we'll have this," and we don't have it. And we might have it. We will probably have it. And if not, maybe Friday. You want to get that language down to the degree of, this is what we deployed yesterday. Right? You want to go from speculation to hard data. That's what continuous integration is about. That's what continuous delivery is about.
That's what trust is about.
That's what trust is about. Rather than me speculating every single day, every single meeting, you get it down to the cadence of, no, this is what we accomplished yesterday. Right? So yesterday we were done with X, and X is 0.7% of the total project. That will give you a vague idea of how we're headed. And usually they will say, okay, cool, but I'm worried about our pacing
Make
here.
progress visible.
And then you need to get together, because when you make progress visible, it shows to the business people just how difficult of a problem this is, so that they over prioritize the bits that are actually important over the ones that are not important. because it always gets the scale problem. The Pareto principle will kick in, and things that are not important will become less important the more you see how constrained the business actually is.
And let me quickly introduce something here, which is, oh, it doesn't actually work. It was a copy. But that actually leads to something different, which is basically I coin it now, the inverted broken window effect. Because the broken window effect now is that if you do something, let's say, if you take a shortcut, then the next shortcut is more likely to happen. If you do it in an inverted way, if you show your progress every day, right? You do that for weeks and months, then business is expecting you in a trustworthy manner that you will do that tomorrow as well. So if you say, we can't do that in time, they don't say you are incompetent, you can't do that, maybe we should take a look for someone else.
They will change
Instead,
their question to, okay, what can we do, or how can we do it? Like, what would need to change in order
that
for
you
us
can
to get
deliver
it done?
tomorrow again. So what is your concern? Because they started to trust you. This is the positive affirmation of the negative version of broken window effect. So you can invert that, and this is how you bridge the gaps. But, and this is the point, you can't do that from today to tomorrow. It's basically not done overnight. If you do that, become an engineer, practice early on, do something like continuous delivery, get the mindset of becoming a TDD practitioner, do things up front for the long term, become a communicative person, become someone who is not taking too much time to look into yourself, but take a look onto what you can do for others. And if you do that on a regular basis, you have high chances to not get into the situation, and you don't need to think about how to bridge the gap because you do that ongoing. And if you can't do that, and this is actually where I was beforehand, so maybe started from the wrong topic. If you come to this point where you join a team where this is already so severe, and you have a hard deadline in 2 weeks, you basically
and you're still hoping.
Yeah. It's so extremely hard. The only chance you have are let's say discussions about that. But to be honest, it is so invaluable. The
extreme case of this negative side of the broken window effect is in software, what we call the death march, where people say there's a deadline, this is it, our business needs this, it needs to be done, and you go onto a death march. Right? So Raul, I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but this kind of behavior where there's complaining going on, where there's a lot of negative emotion for benign behavior, for well-meaning benign behavior, for just bringing it up. Like if you had wasted a week and somebody complains, no problem. If you bring forward an idea and the response to it is complaining, right? So the response to it is a very much intense negative reaction. It might be a sign that the team is on a death march, has been on a death marches regularly, or isn't just about to kick off on one, right? So usually how death marches end is that you are following very bad practices by somebody applying pressure to the team, and then when you approach a deadline, one of two things happens. The deadline was real and work stops and the death march ends, in which case a lot of people get to de-stress and really talk about what just happens, and maybe your team is professional and mature and experienced enough to say, okay, this can never happen again. This what we just did, this is a company-wide fuck up, and we need to prevent this from happening again.
Yeah.
And that's the minority case. The majority case is that the death march's deadline was not real and nothing, it was just a milestone. The project doesn't stop on the deadline. The deadline just keeps taking up more and more of the calendar, and the death march, and you get the next death march, and you do this ad infinitum until people burn out, fall into a depression, get into exhaustion, quit, silent quit, start screaming at trauma, and they just Or they might give up. They might say, "Oh yeah, we're always on a death march. I'll just keep my head low."
This is lose of
I'll
control.
just-
We had that with Richard Donovan in his
Yeah.
show. It is basically losing control, which is basically on some point later in time, but it's just a matter of time that you actually run into burnout. This is what you
Yeah.
do, and you should avoid
And,
running into burnout.
and engineers who say our industry sucks are people who are burned out because of a death march.
Right? Yeah, especially this is especially like in startups, and you have that very often in service oriented.
I actually want to be more specific than that. These things happen in small companies where there is a lack of trust between the business people and the engineering people, and things are not going well, and it's not clear why. Right? So the death march is a consequence of lack of product leadership. Marty Kagan talks about this a lot. If you read his books, Inspired, now his latest book, Transformed, I think is actually talking about this lack of product leadership, what product leadership is, and we discussed this previous Thursday, so I don't want to reiterate. So you can watch last week's streams on this idea and in the planning and agile in the estimation and agile planning section that was requested by our regulars. It's exactly this. It's this. I want to simplify because I want to be able to clip this later, right? So I just want to mention that this finger pointing between the business people and the engineering people happens when engineering people are being told the business is not successful because of something unknown that happens that doesn't happen in the engineering department. And the engineering people say, "Oh, we're unhappy with our engineering practices because of something that isn't happening in the product or the business side of things." And this is usually a concern when you're building things that have proof or no proof of market demand, which means that nobody is talking about a bad product strategy. You are following bad engineering practices in order to serve a bad, non-functional product strategy. It's possible that you built exactly what you needed to satisfy a list of requirements, but then it answers no questions. Nobody had product-related questions. What's good about this? What's bad about this? Are people using it? How likely are people to recommend it? Like, why aren't they recommending it? Why are they recommending it? Are they recommending it for the reasons that we expected? Is the price too high? What do people expect to pay? Did it surprise people that it's freemium and they have to pay at some point? Did it surprise people that we gated some of the features? Like, you gotta be asking these product questions, especially if you're in a product startup, even if you're in a B2B SaaS startup and your product is actually being customly tailored to every large client and it takes a long time to get them. You still need somebody who leads this conversation, because if you don't answer these questions, then engineering departments do not have a closed feedback loop, which means that they have no idea of what of their coding was a waste of time and what wasn't. And if you have no idea, realistically speaking, now from an outside observer as a coach, if you don't know which of your work was valuable and which of your work was not valuable, then all of your work is wasted. If you do not know the answer to this question, you should stop coding.
Yeah, the point is we talked about what an engineer is. An engineer is for the long term. If you cannot determine if you have done good or well, you don't know how to do in the next iteration.
Exactly.
This is the problem. And I can add to that if you have this mindset of a software engineer who's actually a business engineer, who's in there when you talk with those clients, when you talk with people, when you are actually at the pulse of time, right? Where you actually feel the zeitgeist of your product. Then you can react. So you don't even need tickets anymore. This is what I see very often. We here in our company, we work mostly without tickets, and it's working as long as the engineers are actually next to the business people. They are part of the business people. Then you don't need that. So if you cover up your programmers, and I saw that in so many traditional companies where people say, no, you can't talk to the programmers. They are hidden somewhere. This is so strange. It's
a very weird breed of animal. Like, we can't just put you in the pen with them.
It doesn't make sense.
It's very dangerous. It's not safe for you.
No, you shouldn't do that. This is bullshit. Sorry.
Oh no, they're very busy. No, we can't bother them.
Yeah,
with
very,
meetings.
very busy. Yeah. So it is not like you need to talk to me and I will translate. Yeah, exactly. You will translate. You won't translate, and this is the point. You can't translate. There is this in a German. I don't know if it was a philosopher, but it was about communication. I learned that in my engineering school as well. It's about Schulz von Thun. And I don't know the English words actually, but if I would translate it straight, it's about the sender and receiver model. It is about what you actually lose while communicating to another person. So when I say something to you, there are
It's
things
mentioned
like context.
actually. It's mentioned in the book Applying Lean Software Engineering.
Okay.
Because they basically estimate this as 25% of the information makes it through. So you lose 75% of information when you relay information. If I talk to you, you get 25% of what's in my head when I'm talking to you, and there's something really important, right? So if you didn't have to relay it to another person, they get half of that. They get a quarter of that. Exactly. And if they have to relay it one more time, then they get you're down.
And this is the point. The more people are in between you and the original message,
how many
you already in the first iteration of sending it, you already lose. So it is already basically a negative situation. There is never a positive situation. The only thing when you have positively done something is when the engineers test themselves. For example, in the gaming industry, this is more common that the gaming engineers, the software devs, they play their games, right? So this is where you play the games maybe with other people, so they get direct feedback at the zeitgeist pulse of time and stuff.
And in B2B SaaS companies or service companies that produce dashboards or analytics software of some kind, this is called dog fooding, where you force, if you're creating a platform engineering or CI/CD pipeline tool, then you dog food it to the internal organization so that you are forced to be a user, a test user for the product that you're building. So if there's anything about the product that you hate, you go and fix it without actually asking for permission or creating like a design diagram.
Exactly.
Of, I think we should fix this. No, just go and fix it. Like don't suggest that maybe we should fix this and then ask for permission. Again, to get support again, to get over your resistance, just go and fix it. It's like, oh, this was a problem. We tried it. This was a problem. I fixed it. Now it's no longer a problem. Like, be that kind of engineer who sees problems, and because ultimately that's what product teams are. Product teams are teams that make decisions about their product. If you don't make decisions, if decisions are handed to you with a unprioritized, or if you're lucky, prioritized list, then that is already a dysfunction that you need to address. And that's the learning from mistakes bit that Adrian just highlighted. So Raul, thank you for all your questions today. When I say something to someone, I need to be sure she understands the same. And you can practice this. One of the elements of active listening is paraphrasing, right? So you can say, okay, so just to be clear that I understood what you wanted, this is what I heard. You said this is a problem because there's X, Y, and Z, and then they will correct you. It's like, no, actually, no, that's not important. What I actually meant was X, Y, and Z. And you keep doing this until they agree with how you paraphrased it. And usually it takes 4 or 5 rounds of this, right? So it also requires a lot of patience, especially if you get like a real large brain dump. One-on-ones are great for this, by the way. If you want to build trust with somebody, if you want to build trust with your product leadership,
work with somebody, not just talk about that. Experience it firsthand. So if you're a software engineer, we had that, I think with Brian Finster, we were talking about that. So for example, I'm a software engineer, software developer, but I have another profession as well. I'm basically a media specialist, printing specialist. So what I can do as well is basically working on printing machines. What I can do as well is working with InDesign on a professional thing. I can create newspapers, I can print them, I can create videos, I can create audio, visual things, and I can do software development. So I have basically a combination of being a software engineer and having a domain. I first learned the domain professionally. I was already a amateur programmer guy, right? So when I was 8, blah, blah, blah. But on some point, I started with the actual domain, and then I got into software engineering, which is the reason why I became CTO so early on. I was CTPO basically early on, because I
you
was
understood
able
the domain,
to
you
understand
understood the
domain,
engineering,
right?
and you had to translate it to people problems.
And it does make sense
nurturing
if you work in a company where you have an IT department, it does make sense to go to the people who are actually using the software and don't just ask, hey, what do you think? What is the feedback? Sit next to them or stand next to them, whatever they do. So, for example, we have an app running right now in PWA, which agents are using and making some, let's say, surveys for real estates, right? What I have basically personally done was I was going on a survey or several surveys. I were there trying to do that with my app next to those people. I was watching how those people were using the app. It's a business to business app, right? And I saw so many problems I wasn't even aware of. In that moment. Sentry doesn't tell me something like that. Datadog doesn't tell me something about that. I see that when people are blaming their phones and saying, what is that crap, right? And it is not crap. It's just one little piece which makes this person so angry that 100% of the app is bad. And if you fix that on the next journey, it's so great. I've never had something like that before. And this is what you need to do. This is software engineering. A software engineer is on the building side. A traditional engineer is on the building side when the things are getting built. This is direct feedback of the stuff they had planned basically on Canvas. Or on Canva in this case. So this is something you need to take care of. So if you want to become a great software engineer, go to the domain. You need to have a domain. You can't be disconnected from a business domain. We called it business in the first half of the show today, but in reality, it is the domain. The domain where the users are, the business people are, the colleagues are, the users are. So many things are, and you need to be part of that. You need to feel that. If you can't feel that, how can you contribute to that?
And
it's not possible.
It comes back to being on site, right? So you don't, if you're in a department that's siloed, so business people are in a business team and the engineering people are in an engineering team, and the business people are assigning stuff to the engineering team. That's already a sign that the topology of communication is not aligned, and the team is split in half. Right? Because usually the person making decisions and the person building should be on the same team. And sometimes that just has a weird vertical structure to it, where the person making decisions is the CEO and the person building is a junior engineer. In reality, those two people are on the same team. They are a pair. But it would be wildly inappropriate and putting too much pressure on the junior engineer, and it will be wildly demoting the CEO. But that's a problem of how your organization is set up, not in their behavior. The behavior should be encouraged. It's not the CEO micromanaging the junior engineer. The collaboration is actually very welcome. And in my coaching, it's one of the most common. It's one of the most common phrases where. I think every client had this problem of, the CEO is going around my back and going to the junior engineer directly. Dennis, what should I do? I said, encourage it.
Exactly. And
encourage it because that's collaboration.
Companies right now.
Because that's collaboration. There should be more of that. The CEO is taking being part of the team seriously. But now the engineering should also have expectations of the CEO to stick there when things get tough. And they actually have to, encourage it because it's collaboration, and what it signals is that the CEO would rather go down directly into the team and work on the problem rather than put something in the pipeline that they don't trust. So if you don't trust the pipeline, get rid of the pipeline and look at what the natural behaviors are that work, that produce results, because that's the most important thing about the business. You want to produce results. Now, sometimes it'll look like micromanagement, and sometimes it is. Okay, you gotta, your bullshit detector has to be turned on. Sometimes it is micromanagement, and you gotta be able to push back on it. And you want to be able to give support to the person who's afraid to push back because it's the CEO. because it's the person calling the shots, right? So there are negative sides to this as well. I'm not saying this is La La Land and everything's happy unicorns. But the key idea here is that if you're in such an organization, then there is a distrust towards the pipeline. If I put it in Jira, nobody will do it. And even if I mark it as a blocker or high priority, good, get rid of that process. That process is dysfunctional. But then when that direct communication happens, get people involved. Like, try to get feedback on it and try to make it something better rather than this, oh, we're doing a secret stealth mission and going behind the CTO's back and right. So take a learning experience from that. It might the intent is clear, but the execution might be clumsy.
Yeah.
It's like wielding a large tool and it goes clunk, and you wanna be able to just get the idea behind that. It's like you want to dance and you're just a terrible dancer. But the point is that you got on stage and you actually had a cool moment. So you want to work on that. You want to take that and work on it, and maybe just improve the dance moves to make them a little bit more less rigid, less clunky, and to project more confidence. Right? You want to work with that. But absolutely what you don't want to do is, hey, no more talking, no more going behind my back. We need to follow the process. If the process doesn't work, I need the feedback to come back to the process. No, people going behind your back and avoiding your process is feedback. You need to act on it. and you can't improve a process you don't trust.
What I want to add to that,
and I just want to add to that, Vasco Duarte says, you either trust your process or you have to change it.
Right.
There is no incremental improving it. Go ahead. And now add to the ad.
Exactly. So you said this example, and I see this quite often, to be honest, is when you have let's say you have a team of several engineers who are there for quite a while, and they all consider themselves mid-level upwards, right? So most of them consider themselves, of course, senior developer after 3 years.
Everybody's contract says senior developer.
Exactly. That's a great thing because it doesn't sound that bad. And
everybody does speak.
In reality, and I have a very strict opinion about what senior actually is, as well as I have a strict opinion about what a craftsman and what an engineer is. And for me, and this is the point, is senior does give back. I have written about that so much, right? You can read about this. A senior engineer is not pay grade. This is just the contract stuff. But you
can read about it down there. There's links.
A senior engineer is about someone who's a cornerstone of the team and contribute to the team, contribute to the process, similar to the engineer, which is the reason why this is very, very similar, very related. The point is now, when you have a team of pseudo senior engineers sitting there having we have done that always like that, we don't want to change it, and then the CEO, and I see that very often, maybe those CEOs are watching right now, there's a high possibility, right? They know they have some issues with the process. They want to have them stuff, but they seem to be totally disconnected or running against the wall when it comes to engineering. No, that's not possible. No, that's not how we're doing that. Blah, 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 blah. So many reasons not to do that given by the engineering department, which task is to actually contributing to the system. And this is what I hate about this idea of being too much craftsman. Someone who says, no, we need to do that like that because in the medieval age we have done that as well this way. No. We need to contribute to become better. This is innovation. You need to do that. And I can understand and relate to the CEOs in that moment. And what they do then, of course, is going to the people who are not tainted by that bullshit and going to them and ask them for help. And this is what you just said. And in reality, and when I joined those companies as a fellow to try to help them there, actually the junior developers are the key to do that, not the seniors. The seniors coming to you and telling you, oh, we have problems.
We tried that and it's not possible.
This guy is strange.
Yeah, we tried it once, it didn't work, so we stopped trying.
Yeah. No, so it's just usually blaming others. This is nonsense.
Exactly, and it's this justified blame that then says, we tried it before, there was a problem, so now we will never try it again.
Exactly.
Rather than learning from why didn't it work, right? Because nobody asked the question, okay, it didn't work, but what about it worked? What about it did we like? And what would it get? If somebody's resistant to it, you can ask them the question, what will it take for you to adopt this idea? Oh, I won't adopt it because this and this goes bad when we do that. Okay, That's good feedback. Now we can act on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you want to have to. You don't want the bells and whistles, the signals and the communication channels between your departments and between your teams and in your senior management meetings to be Boolean. Did you like this? Yes or no? Did you like this? Yes or no? Did you like this? Yes or no? No, you don't want to. Stop asking yes or no questions. Ask people, okay, how can we get to deploying once per day? Not, hey, can we deploy once per day? Engineering says, no, that's impossible. No, that's silly. Yes, kind of. I mean, it depends, but it's super expensive. I think no.
Yeah.
That's I hate when that. I'm shouting
suddenly engineers remember their deadlines and they want to follow their deadlines.
Yeah.
Suddenly deadlines are interesting again.
Oh, come on. I'm writing an article about it right now, and this will be a preview from my book, because I am writing a book, and I'm very serious now about writing the book. And I mentioned about it. It's in front of me here because I have it set up. Genuinely, there will be two ways where resistance comes in to this, not wanting to learn from mistakes. Either there is resistance to lowering quality, right? So the broken window effect or the reverse broken window effect. There might be resistance to lowering quality, or there might be resistance to increasing quality, right? So the resistance to lowering quality will be engineers or architects who are perfectionists, a well-meaning member who doesn't understand the business, so they cannot articulate the whys and hows in business terms, and somebody who is stubborn and arrogant and is attachment to current process and ritual, traditionalists, and people who just want to, people who have been with the company for 15 years,
mainly.
And elitists, yes, or not elitists per se, in that something is being done very well, but let's say they have been with the company for so long, it's become part of their DNA to do it in a certain way. So it becomes a profound element to their how and why, and it's not really data-driven or value-driven. That's the lower end. Then there's the higher end. When there's resistance to increase quality, it's a team that is overpressured, and they mistake the discomfort from increasing quality with the pain from the pressure that they're feeling. So they think, oh, if I'm in pain right now, I'm hypersensitive to the pressure, to the discomfort of learning something new. So that will be painful. I'm in pain right now. I do not want to do anything that might increase this experience. I see this a lot in particularly in the teams that have started testing and then dropped the practice and are under pressure on bugs and support and maintenance. The other element is people in your team or organization, engineering or business, who see increasing quality as a waste of time, but spending time in meetings and wasting time on debugging, that they don't see as a waste of time, right? So there is this skewed perception of this kind of activity is wasteful, prevention is wasteful, but actually acting on problems is not wasteful. This is a culture that values heroics. Like Brian Finster says, don't be Batman. Your process needs to work every day. If you want to be on time, you need to be on time every day. Don't do we're late, it's shit, and now we can do heroics. That's a bullshit way of building software.
I need to come.
And then the other two, the other two are engineers who cannot explain what quality is really. Just coders who don't really understand what quality means in their context, in the business context, and mistaking the introduction of a discipline as a signal that they will lose autonomy, right? So if we're this sort of cowboy, Wild West kind of coders, now we get this sort of structure. Oh no, this is corporate hell. I want to oppose this because I will lose my autonomy. Somebody's telling me how to do my job. So generally, agile consultants and agile coaches get this kind of stigma. So this is the side where people resist the increase in quality, where people show resistance towards increasing quality, and this is the most common because lowering quality actually sometimes makes sense, but only in businesses that have existential threats. Lowering quality only makes sense in businesses that are already on a death march, right? So usually this means you lower quality in good faith when somebody's immediate health or security is concerned, when you're so short on money that any short-term monetary gain will be a net benefit to the business, compared to going bankrupt or not being able to pay salaries next week. And during or just prior to layoffs, when adopting a new principle might actually cause disruption and broken expectations with the people that you're about to lay off. So, and people are very sensitive to this last one. They see that, oh no, we're not allowed to adopt TDD. Why is that? Well, because ... you're all getting laid off next week. So we don't want to
But
invest
it
in
is about
productivity.
prevention. This is what I said beforehand. If you are
Mhm.
so close to a real dead end, right, where you can't get further, where it's actually end, the end. This
It's
is
like a
not
deadline.
good.
That's what deadline
This
means.
is extremely hard to get out, or let's say successful out of that survival mode.
Yeah.
It is hard. It will cost you not only money. And the point about this is it will, especially it will damage your culture, the trust, and everything in your company long term. And actually it's hard to recover from that. And it is so important to understand what we are actually here talking about, right? It's nothing we really sell. It is actually an overarching idea which applies not only to software engineering, it applies to nearly everything. It applies to how you manage your own life, how you care for families, how whatever. Just take something, following your hobby, something like that. In order to do that, you need to take care about the process and the long term. If you just take a look at what short term is, this is about procrastination, this is about egoism, this is about those things, this is about yourself. And this is why I've written here, it's about the how. People are so often complaining on LinkedIn, or that other people are, talking about trendy things and blah, blah, blah. And they have such a specific view on things, how things should be done. They put so much energy into something which is not worth putting energy into it. Because it is just something right now, a momentary technology we use. It is not about why. Why is about how can we evolve that? How can we get to the next step? How can we get out of the problem area we are right now? And how can we step up the game? How can we make a better work-life balance out of everything? How can we increase maintainability to get people to be happy to work again? I see some people writing on LinkedIn something like, you shouldn't care about developer experience because it's so much more, important to care about the user. This is nonsense. Stupid. Sorry to say that now.
It is. I see we missed some
If
comments.
you don't care for your people, they can't care for your users. It's simply as that.
I mean, it always comes down
Sorry,
to
I'm
developer
a little bit
experience.
It is no. I'm just saying that.
No, I'm appreciating the
No.
passion.
So because I'm working with so many companies struggling. I'm not talking about money right now. There's money involved as well. I'm talking
it's morale.
about people.
It's mostly morale.
It's morale. People are broken.
People not caring. Yeah.
People are broken because of those things. People are saying something that they don't know anything about. They never were in that situation. They never were responsible for those situations. And they sit there and giving advice which is nonsense in that area. And this is dangerous to do so. It is so dangerous. You need to take care for everything around you. The culture is so important. And if you have a bad culture, you cannot deliver value. And if the only thing is, hey, I want to attract some startups to hire me, and I give some advice the CEOs or investors want to hear, I don't respect that. I don't want to work with those people. Just to say that. I don't like to work with startups, just for everyone to listen. This is the most toxic environment you can work in. I hate it. I don't do that anymore. Just, you don't need to ask me to work there. I don't want to. And the point is exactly about that. You will lose as a software engineer in a startup. The chance that you get on some point in a successful situation where you feel well is extremely low. And oftentimes the people who build up the first iterations are burned out and just exchanged or substituted by new people who are then wealthy.
Repeating. Yeah.
And this is so awful to see so often. I see that every week. Every week I see exactly this. And I can't respect when people on LinkedIn or other social media say anything in that direction. Sorry to say, I say that on stream so everyone can. It is, no, you hurt people. Stop that. This is not okay. Sorry to say that. Good. Let's calm down a bit because But it is
We did-
actually like that. So no,
We
no.
did. Hang on. We did miss a few comments, so I just want to address. So Angel, hello, Darsil, Randa, and I believe Emmanuel. Your comments unfortunately didn't come over to our streaming software. I now just double checked on LinkedIn. I like to do that sort of at least once in the show. Appreciate you being here with us, and our viewer count increased slightly just in the second half of the show. Let's continue with the direction of the rant. We also have a comment. No, I like this because I like this because it does concern developer experience. Anjana says, if you can't care for employees, how do you take care of customers? Caring is a
Exactly.
behavior you choose to do. Exactly.
Have you
And
ever
Raoul-
seen a family which is effectively doing something for them when they start to argue with each other all day long? I haven't. The families who are actually successful family businesses are working together.
Mhm.
They solved all problems in between them. They make everything that working in a family business is a good thing, and everyone is proud of that. This is developer experience in our case, in our context. And if you ignore that, you will get nowhere. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Rule mentions he had an experience with a company that says they don't do DevX. We don't do that around here. Sorry to hear you had that kind of experience. It sounds like you were sort of put off by that comment. So,
But
it's sort of
this
like a
is
chicken egg problem. It's a bit of a chicken egg problem, right? Because this happens in all industries, not just software. And where it becomes more particular in software, bringing it a bit back to more this broken window effect, is that shortcuts that you make will make it into your DNA, right? So you make a decision to skip on testing, let's say, or you don't have a product leader and you say, well, we'll figure out, we'll build the software and people will come. And then once people start using it, then we'll make product decisions. You need somebody who is thinking strategically about product from day one. You can't put off important decisions just because it would make you work more slowly. Martin Kagan talks about this a lot. And he made a really good point. He's from California. So he's from the Silicon Valley Product Group. And he has a very sort of US-centric West Coast perspective on this. And European businesses, especially small and medium businesses, are very different than US startups. Very different. We have titles that they don't have. We have people in roles that don't make sense. And we're generally lagging behind funding and visionary targets. And even now, AI adoption, there's very few AI companies in Europe who are not US funded.
yes.
So it's worth mentioning that product leadership, especially in European companies, fall into what traditionally in Europe, in the EU, fell on the cost centers. So IT departments. IT departments is an IT, a CIO, a chief information officer, who is heading an IT department. Germans now jokingly even call engineering departments IT departments. IT departments are always cost centers. That kind of leader manages the costs and the evolution of the department and the ongoing costs of having such a department. Whereas a product leadership team is a profit center. They are concerned with building profitable assets, features, products, brands, combining niche markets with niche behavior, with niche features, with niche use cases and critical user journeys, as Nick Shoemaker likes to call them. Right? So when you're coming from a perspective of cost center mentality, you're treating the market as, oh, if I deploy this to AWS, it'll cost me this much. So as I'm building it, I need to limit cost as much as possible. That's how a cost center mentality IT department runs. And that has no place in product leadership. In product leadership, your main concern is, what are our main business metrics? Why do people buy from us, not from our competitors? How much more are people willing to buy, to pay, to buy from us rather than our competitors? What product lines are our competitors working on that we should know about before they hit the market? That's profit-centered thinking. And your engineers should be closer to this kind of thinking than the cost-centered thinking. Because only your SREs and your CTO should then be thinking about, hey, do I need to hire somebody who manages the cost of engineering? But ideally, you need somebody on the team, not the org, not the C-suite, the team, who is thinking in a profit sense, who is thinking, if I build this feature, this will make sense. It'll delight our customers. It'll generate more revenue. It'll increase conversions. It'll increase retention. It'll make our users' life suck less when they use the app, when they open the app. It'll make the app freeze less. It'll make the installation process less annoying. You know that all the features in Microsoft Windows, and we said we wouldn't talk about Windows, but let's talk about Windows. Microsoft Windows' IT department in the early 2000s, late 90s, was a cost center. So that's why Apple got so popular, because they created a for-profit product leadership department that really took product leadership as a profit center seriously, which is why Apple products are so expensive, because they figured out what delights users and why they're about what makes them be prepared to pay more money for it. There are features now in Microsoft Windows, and I do use Microsoft Windows. I'm not dishing on it, but there are features in it which nobody's really proud of. This idea that it has to reboot itself and, oh, please don't turn off the computer. I'm gonna install some updates for 10 minutes. When I'm in a hurry and when I'm dual booting a Mac and the Windows system, and I accidentally go into Windows and it tells me don't turn off the computer, well, guess what I do? I just hit hard reboot and I go back into OS X, because this idea that, oh, we'll just create features and some features are necessary because our people need them, and nobody asked the question, hey, does this make our users more miserable? Because they didn't have a cost sheet for that, but they also didn't have a profit sheet for that, because they were not charging for it. Because back in the day, Windows software was being sold wholesale with hardware, so nobody had a choice not to buy it, which is why their product strategy was lacking. It was not a profit center, because there were already people forced to buy the operating system because they were working off of a monopoly. And nowadays, you see similar experiences with Apple, with the DMA, is facing exactly the same problem, which is why people are all complaining, right? Because if it's expensive and our well-being is at heart, no problem, all the power to you. But if you're forcing me to use something, and you will stop giving it love, you as the company who builds the software, if you stop caring about the software, if you stop caring about the people who build the software, and you just force me to buy it no matter what, and use it in whatever condition you give it to me, I'm going to start objecting. And it's possible you're creating customers like that. If you neglect the profit aspect of your product leadership in your engineering team, they will create software which is like Microsoft Windows's, software update system. It's like, oh no, we have to do this. So when the user loads the website, we will just show a spinner for 2 minutes and tell them we're sorry. So it's not a good way of building software.
If you need to maintain Windows service and you have 10 servers to update,
Windows Server. It's even worse.
Patch days.
It's even worse. Patch days and Windows Server is because they're mandatory.
Installed all the patches and
because
finally
you have SLAs,
they rebooted again.
Because you
have
SLAs
updates again, and you see so many new updates coming after the updates, and you don't know when you actually finish.
Yes,
you sit there for hours and doing updates, right? Yeah, great.
I'm just getting PTSD from.
Let's be honest. Majority of my computer time I used Windows, and it was always a good OS. So especially for personal use, you can do so much with it. Of course, it was a little bit more insecure than others. It has
It kickstarted the graphics card market in the late 90s. It kickstarted the broadband market with ISDN and ADSL and VDSL later, and optic and fiber
Yeah.
optics and cable. It kickstarted the
It was the reason why so
home
many
streaming
people got into
business.
computer, right?
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
It is. It was
It
accessible.
created a huge for-profit market.
Don't forget that when I started to learn my profession, Macs were basically the business computers and Windows were the personal computers. You were not calling the Mac a personal computer back then. Yes, they basically on paper.
And they were also too expensive.
Yeah, this is the terminology. PC is related to Windows. But in reality, PC is actually the terminology for a computer you personally use, which is actually the Mac as well. But people tend to say, I use the Mac for business. And this is
more of a productivity tool, yeah.
It is, especially in the printing industry, it is today the standard still. And I returned to
Yeah,
Mac
they had
for
a
other
very,
reasons.
I mean, again, because their product line had a for-profit wing, a for-profit arm in the product leadership team that was obsessed with the precision of colors on the screen, to the degree that it highlighted, how does it degrade over time? How does it contrast to your work environment? What does the material need to be like to really translate it well to most use cases? What are the use cases? Who's buying these? And Microsoft Windows is more like a platform. It's more like a, we just ship it and then you figure out how to configure it. It's closer to the Linux mentality, the original Linux mentality. But Linux failed to produce
I remember so many friends back then who complained that Windows is not good because they had so many blue screens after buying the cheapest part they could find and assemble a computer out of that.
Okay, I don't want to go that deep on the rant. Let's go back to go back to engineering culture. So
what I wanted to quickly mention, because we haven't included the audience today that much, is we reacted to comments, but there are not many comments, but a lot of people there. This is a little different to the others. So normally we have less people but more comments. So is that like a topic where you just listen to us, and because it's very stable actually, the numbers. Are you actually listening to us and it's interesting for you? Are you agreeing with us, disagreeing with us? What is your feedback? Tell us a little bit about what you think. Is that actually, does it make sense what we say? Does it align with you want? Is it something
what did you learn
evokes
today?
Desire, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. So this is important for us to understand, because
what is something interesting that you've heard or controversial, something you agree with, or something new that you've learned that you want to adopt?
And are you disagreeing with us? Tell us, because we like to discuss, and we won't get loud. I promise. I promise. Okay. Then learning from mistakes, the last point on the agenda for the last 15 minutes.
I think when it comes to mistakes in engineering specifically, I would go back to the beginning of our conversation where we said, using extreme programming terminology, the team is made up by business people making business decisions that make sense under engineering constraints, and it's made up of engineering people making engineering decisions to satisfy the business constraints. So mistakes that happen, you don't make engineering mistakes. Your engineering highlights product mistakes, and your product will highlight engineering mistakes. And so when you launch a product, if there's a bug that wasn't test covered, that shows you a mistake in your engineering practices. When you engineer something and nobody's using it, that shows a mistake in your product understanding. So the biggest part, I think, that most people struggle with, engineering teams specifically, engineering teams that are cost centers specifically, is that the communication channels are so disconnected, so dysfunctional, that this idea that engineering teams produce product feedback and product teams produce engineering feedback, it just doesn't cross the threshold. There's a silo, there's a wall, and you do this grenade-driven development. I really like that Brian thought of this phrase where you bundle up a packaged piece of requirements, or failing tests in QA, or QA feedback, or customer problem, or customer support feedback, and you toss it into an email and you throw it over a wall like a grenade and hope somebody will catch it on the other side.
Most likely the grenade is coming back to you. That's a problem.
Most likely the grenade is coming back to you. It's like, I don't understand, I cannot reproduce, blah, 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 blah. And usually it really diminishes all potential for any learning of happening because it's just pointing fingers.
Mhm.
Which is why it's so important that the product team and the engineering team is the same team. The engineering team needs to show evidence and efficacy of having product leadership. Right? So everybody who wants to come into the team and give them feedback, include them into the team. Don't just tell them, yeah, write me an email and send it to me. No, sit them down in front of a computer and try to fix a problem. That works so much better. Like, pair with them, collaborate with them, get them in front of an engineer and fix a problem together. That is the best way that you can bridge this gap, because you need it. You need the product understanding and the engineering understanding to manifest at the same time in front of the same computer screen. Now, if it's in one brain, in one skull, amazing. If it's two people working together, also fine. If it's three people ensembling, cool. But that's, that gets a bit tiring and taxing. So make sure you do it deliberately and within meaningful boundaries, not 8 hours a day to force people to work together. Because that also doesn't work. That's also dysfunction. But the important part is that when there's a problem in engineering, it's giving feedback that something's wrong with our business strategy, something's wrong with our product strategy. When there's problem with adoption about bugs, there's a problem in the engineering culture, in the pipeline, right? It's like, why did the bugs go out in the first place? Why did we create them in the first place? What did we miss, right? So there has to be cohesion here. There has to be collaboration here. There's back and forth, this sort of safe, large-scale, orchestrated workflow. It doesn't work because people just shift blame. It's like, what is a product problem? What is a QA problem? What is a planning problem? Whose fault is it? And that never really solves any meaningful problem in any meaningful way.
I need to ask ChatGPT what Raoul is telling us.
Okay.
I don't understand that. And DeepL is not translating that.
Grenade-driven development, Anjana says, happens when there is a crowd of players between engineering and product. I mean, it's really important. You can have, so product is interesting, right? So if you're following Scrum or any kind of other super dysfunctional methodology, what's really important to understand is that a product owner, a product manager is not a leader. They are an individual contributor. And you will notice this, is that product owners, product managers usually don't have anybody reporting to them. They are actually reporting to the team in some way. Or the team is in some dysfunctional way reporting to them without actually being their boss, without actually being, they might have an engineering manager who they actually report to, but then they sort of get these sort of prioritized lists from the PO. And so it's really important is that to understand the product leader, the person who exhibits product leadership, the person who thinks for profit inside your organization, if you're a for-profit organization, which most of you here are, it will not say so in their title. They might be the senior engineer with the most influence. They might be the tech lead. They might be a VP of some kind. They might be an architect that's sort of moonlighting between several teams and sort of really bringing the product mentality together. The product leadership happens in unexpected places in your org, depending on its structure, depending on its size. It might be one of the founders. It might be the CEO. It might be the COO, for all you know. It might be the head of marketing that drives all product leadership, right? So, but you need to understand who it is, because they are running the shots, and they need to learn about the product. Like you, the engineering team, need to go to them and ask them, what answers are we trying to get? What are our questions? What are our OKRs? Like what are we improving by putting this feature into the system? Like you, the engineering team, need to push back and ask them this question. And then on the other side, you want to make sure, hey, now that we know what you're focusing on, we adopted TDD. Did you see a difference? Did you see an improvement? Did something get worse? Or did you see no change at all? That's how you want to approach a discussion, because you want to tackle it from both sides. and you really want to understand the business outcomes of you adopting new principles. Because if you don't, then you're just playing around, and it doesn't make sense, and you're not professional. You didn't go pro yet. You're just a craftsman, right? You're just there with a salary
I
job,
like
blue
you
collar
adopted the
job.
terminology. Turning pro. What's actually about a dedicated session for talking about the war of art, the ideas, and how to connect it with the software development world? What is the turning pro moment for a software engineer?
I mean, I think it depends. I think there's many different kinds of turning pro in software.
Turning
One
pro
would
is not
be.
about I earn money with that.
I think
not pro.
turning pro is an actual seniority in engineering, right? When you were chief engineer on some product.
But when are you actually senior engineer? We never
No,
had a
no.
dedicated
So
session
I
for
don't
that.
mean senior, whatever the title means. But I mean when you are chief engineer on some problem, when you own a problem, not by name, not somebody assigned it to you, but you said, "Oh, I really get this. We should improve it, and here's what I'm going to do to improve it, and here's how I'm going to measure it, and then here's
Taking
how I'm going to
initiative.
and taking initiative, and here's how I'm going to get influence. Here's how I'm going to use my influence, and how I'm going to ask for support, and here's how I'm going to present it to the business. Here's some obstacles that I need some help and ask questions." I think once you start acting like that in any organization, even if your title doesn't say so, that's your turning pro moment. I think that's usually what's considered L5 in most FANG companies, but generally this is the sort of going from senior engineer to tech lead, or from senior engineer to technical product manager, or for some kind of architect, or
And the point is, I think most of the audience of us is not in Fang Mang or something like that. They are
no, I
more
don't think
like in
so.
the startup area or traditional SME
I mean,
areas.
oh my god.
This is still not working.
One
My
of our
camera,
regulars.
I have
No,
an
please
M1,
help me.
but there is no
His name.
something. What?
His name escapes me.
Who?
Grant. Grant is.
Grant.
Yeah, Grant recently.
Oh, Grant.
Congratulations.
Yeah, Grant
Yeah.
is now gone. He is now fired.
Grant is now gone. Grant is now
Goodbye,
working for Microsoft.
He's now not with us low guys
Yes.
anymore, right?
So a lot of you who are watching us are actually being successful even in this tough market of trying to get a new job, or going solo, going pro in a different way, and going to consultancies and following into our footsteps and going more into coaching, or to sort of broadening in as solopreneur path. So congratulations to Grant and to all the
Yes.
others who are sort of really, really doing the work and improving yourself, sharing how you're improving, building a personal
You
brand.
could have watched Netflix, but you were watching us, so
Yeah.
probably there was some
There's
reason
that.
to it.
There's that. Any questions from our audience?
Not so far. Strange today.
Maybe it doesn't work. Sometimes it just lags behind.
No,
Let me
there's
recheck. Let me check manually. Yeah.
No, there's nothing. I was following the notifications feed actually.
What did Raul say? You mentioned Raul had a comment. What does that mean?
Oh, actually, there. Oh no. It means that feo means ugly in Spanish. Malo translates to bad or evil, and ka is actually not in the word. There's something like aka.
Maybe it's a phrase,
And-
some kind.
But ChatGPT explained what the smiley was, and it was a smiling face, and that helped me quite a lot to understand that one.
Angela mentions, I'm currently working on setting up runbook or run logs for production bugs. Some bug fix verification takes years, which is ridiculous. How is it addressed generally?
Okay, question then. I'm currently working on settings up run book or run logs for production bugs. Some bug fixes. Okay.
Well,
I'm not 100% sure if
John,
I understand the question correctly.
You're in a C# stack, right? Yeah, it's about observability, I believe. Angela, give us some more detail.
Is it about understanding the logs, or is it about creating the logs? So, do you get too many logs and you can't see anything anymore? Is it more like this?
So, what's her name? If you go to Honeycomb IO's engineering blog, they write a lot about OpenTelemetry, about logging culture. One of my mentees, John Gallagher, he's building a product. He's really focusing on observability in Ruby on Rails apps, and he's really going into this strategic sense of how to save costs in logging, where you just have a lot of bullshit logs and nobody really understands how to read them, and at the same time structuring logs in such a way that it follows product learning rather than just creating a digital trace of a machine of machine output. I don't remember what her name is. So a Honeycomb, she has a very interesting name.
So Anjana said creating the logs so the bug can be traced.
Yeah.
It's not logs generated by the application.
Let me look it over real quick. It'll take me 60 seconds because me and John have a correspondence about it.
What can I say up front is something I always do in the
Charity majors. There we go.
Okay.
Charity majors.
Can you post that into the chat? So we all
Yeah.
have
So
something,
so Charity Majors is the CTO of Honeycomb, and if you follow her writing, I'm not sure. I think it's on charity.wtf. And she talks a lot about logging and engineering practices in general. So you can just check out her blog. I'll link it in chat. I think that's her. So the point is, what you want to get across primarily with logging is what I found to be very effective is to have logs really capture intent. So don't log line by line and then dump it in with millions of spans and trace IDs, etc. And then you need to have a software.
This is for debugging, but this is logging. Your system is not debugging. If you are digging into a problem, more logs is okay, but I wouldn't have too many logs because of fatigue in this case.
There are now two types of systems here, right? So are you losing data or are you keeping all data, right? So if you're in an event source system, then you're keeping all data and your event stream is a sufficient log system to parse. If you're more in a state-based system or in a mixed system where you have event-driven architecture, but you don't durably store your events, you just, for bookkeeping purposes, you process them and then delete them, as you would with like an insert statement in the database gets logged on the delta, but then you only keep the final state and eventually the binary log gets purged. Right. So if you're in the latter part of the system, you will need logs, and those logs will also not last forever. You're probably storing them for some amount of time somewhere. So your general strategy for observability will be creating wide events. Wide events meaning, what did the logging parse look like from the user's perspective? What was the user doing? And you will have this distributed problem of the user was probably talking to 12 different servers, and now I'll need to link it back together. So what you really want to be creating is a reverse trace of something a user does. Now, the issue that you might be having, and I'm not sure, but one of the problems that often comes up is that the engineers simply do not have enough product context to really understand how the user is using the system, which makes it impossible to debug. Because you don't know what the user was doing, you only see how the service reacted to something the user did. As long as you don't understand what the thing the user did was, it's going to be very difficult to debug. Now, you might see outage in the system, and then your question might be, I see outages on Friday. Let's debug that. It's a silly way of approaching it, because the outage will be ephemeral, and then if the outages go away, you don't know whether you solved the problem or not. What you want to be asking is, what are our users doing on Friday that might cause outage? What are behavior scenarios that happen on Friday that aren't present on any other day? What usage scenarios, what behaviors become apparent from our users when load is high? What usage scenarios become apparent on weekends, after lunch, on Fridays, on Monday mornings? That's what you want to understand and debug it from the user's perspective. Don't look for outages. How do I debug the outage on Friday morning? Because that's a server concern, and the logs are not written in such a language. So that's the first part. You need to have
look
a
for
product.
anomalies. So what I would call it,
Yes,
look for anomalies.
yes. Look for anomalies and present them in product customer facing language. If you had to give a trace to the user, a report to the user, hey, on Friday you tried to do this and this and this, and it caused an outage on your account. Think about it from that perspective, and try to solve the problem by putting it in front of the user, because then you also be able to adopt TDD principles to it. Because if I'm actually building a user interface to potentially create a report or an incident report to the user, then you might actually test cover it, because you're actually creating a visual artifact for it.
But if you test cover it, you don't need to log it like a maniac. So
exactly.
If you have tested it well and you have built up confidence that you don't need to log what you already have tested, right? What you need to do instead is, as Dennis said, find anomalies. For example, we're talking a lot about front-end in React and PWAs, and tools like Sentry help you a lot. Actually, you need to pay for that, so it's not like a free thing you have. But and
it gets quite expensive. It's quite expensive. There are, large enterprises might be paying anything upwards of 50 to 200K per month.
Yeah, but you can debounce actually. Logs. You can build in thresholds where you say you want only log half, like
you just want to drop user, or
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
This is what you can
put
do.
Statistic. You put statistical sort of spreading or shedding.
So we had that, for example, like what there was a problem. It was so odd. Like 2 people of the entire user base reported strange errors that they cannot log into the app anymore, and it was like let's say they say they used Chrome browser to do that, but somehow something went wrong, right? I think I already talked about that in one session beforehand, but the point was we were finding out with Sentry an anomaly in those both cases, that they actually use a fake Chrome version, which was the OpenWave browser, right? And it is basically the system filtered that browser out because of the way we detect browsers and say which browsers are allowed and which not. And they saw that as basically a bug, and they reported it as my browser is not being accepted, the app is broken. No one really could say what the problem is, but a tool like Sentry in that case, with getting you data around what happens, the behavior of the system, and telling you, with those people you have anomalies in the last 2 or 3 days, and then you ask what happens in those 2 or 3 days. You saw they just used another browser which looks like a Chrome, but it wasn't. So this was actually the thing. It was the anomaly you're looking for, because you don't need to test, for example, if your browser detection is still working. This is a part of the unit test which you need to do then, or maybe an integration test, because it's when you want to browser detect, maybe you need to test the browser.
Usually debugging is a failure in expressing SLAs or quality expectations from product, right? So you should be asking yourself the question of, okay, we have this bug, how does it affect our users? Like, does it reduce retention on the majority of our users? Does it create an outage on a small minority of our users? Does it create a lack of trust? Are people complaining about it? Is there public communication on boards and Reddit and X going on regarding outages of this kind? Is somebody bypassing customer success channels to seek help on LinkedIn by talking to our CTO? What's going on? Sometimes I see people complaining on Instagram, hey, I didn't receive the package. Right, and that becomes then a public customer support channel, right? So you need to be understanding, how is this impacting how people perceive our brand? How is this impacting how people use our system? Are people trying to solve it by going around? We knew, sometimes we know that, LinkedIn has this problem with StreamYard. We never cared to debug it. We go around the problem. I open up LinkedIn in a separate tab, right? And now this creates weird behavior, because now I watch my own stream, but I don't listen to it, and it creates an anomaly in their statistics, right? So you want to be able to really understand what the user is doing and why, and then ask for feedback and try to really figure out as much context as you can from product side. Don't bugs, logs, defects, anomalies are never an engineering problem. They're always a product problem. And if you haven't defined them in advance, you don't have tests for them. But when you fix the problem, fix them by writing tests for them. It's like, hey, if this and this doesn't get addressed this way, it negatively impacts our loading times, or it negatively impacts delight to our customers, or it causes sporadic behavior in loading times. So let's slow it down for everybody to make sure that the average loading time is below X. If you might be using, there are some cases where you're caching for everybody and it works fine, and then there's some cold users that don't have access to that, and then they just have a terrible experience. Sometimes you have to make trade-offs like that. Hello, Kaloyan.
After 2 hours and 9 minutes, we are finally complete.
Awesome. What else?
We
Because I would like to wrap up.
questions.
2 more
Actually,
questions.
3 more. Yes. We have one
Let's go.
from LinkedIn user. This is a common name. Hello, everyone. I
Very common
appreciate
name.
the valuable insights you are sharing. How do you balance the need for innovation and experimentation with the potential risk of making mistakes in a software project? That is actually a good question.
It's in your face. Hello, Eric.
First of all, experimentation is very important because so this is a little bit about where people think of experimentation, expensive, deadline. Oh no, let's don't do it. We had that several times today talking about those things. But what is experimentation? Experimentation is a result. It is actually you can see that you have something in your culture, in a business sense, in the sense of continuous delivery and getting business and engineering together, that there is an open willingness to test out new things, trying to improve things. This is the engineering aspect. And if you have that not only in your engineering department, but as well in the business department, which is then one department because this is the business, trying to do something, to test something, to create a thesis and try to prove the thesis by bringing a proof.
Hypothesis.
Hypothesis, right? In this,
I can pronounce it either. It's a hypothesis. Yeah.
Really? So it maybe just a German mismatch. But anyway, so it is about
A thesis is a claim. A hypothesis is an assumption, right? So you're trying to prove your.
Of course,
assumption.
it's late already.
Right, so
Okay, but if you have that in place, right, then you have a culture which actually says that, hey, we are willing to do those things, which is a sign, first of all, that you have a healthy culture. This is a positive effect. No matter if the experiments are, let's say, successes or failures, because your team, the people working there, are already on the, let's say, on the right track to become successful. On some point, they will become successful. So experimentation, for example, Dennis and me, now it's not really about software development now, but when it comes to streaming, writing
we
content,
experiment a lot.
this is only experimentation.
We have fights.
99%
We
of
have
the stuff
fights.
we do is
We
not
have fights
successful.
about we need to make the thumbnail like this and this and this, and I'm like, why? We have no evidence that would change anything. Or we need to invite people, or we need to announce. It's like we have no evidence that has any positive or negative effect.
The
So let's try
point
to
is,
do
it
the
brought
opposite.
us here, right? It brought us
Yeah.
here. It brought us here, but we actually there are so many things debunked already, which we thought in the beginning would
Yeah.
be like that or something. For
Yeah.
example, how to get actually people on stream. But it's just a little bit out. Just do an experiment, and this is the same which you can apply to your company as well. If
Yeah.
your company
Because
is willing to say,
Adrian-
let's test.
We had some wild ideas at the beginning, and we said, well, if we need to do X to get a lot of viewers, then if I do the opposite on Thursday, I get less viewers. And that was the experiment. I was willing to risk one episode to get data on that. And what happened is that on both days we got the same amount of views. Now, if we hadn't done both takes, the control group per se, then we wouldn't know that, oh, actually this didn't make any difference at all. Like we were just fighting and arguing about something that
And
doesn't
then there
make
was the
any-
day where we suddenly have 10 times the numbers of people.
Yeah, and then we had
and
Nick
we,
on
no
and-
one
and
knew
something
why.
clicked. Yeah,
And next
so
day it
our-
was same again.
our biggest stream was and then it suddenly grew. Something clicked, and we got feedback, and it started making more sense, and we started including the people more, and started sort of streamlining
But
our
since
topics more.
then we have stable high numbers actually.
And
which
it's
is
increasing stably, yeah. And also YouTube is growing like crazy. So Thank you.
But yes, let's get back to the question. How do you balance the need for innovation and experimentation with the potential of risk-making mistakes in a software project?
I have a take. I have a controversial take here. I have a
Yeah,
controversial take
let's
here.
go ahead then.
So from your language, Eric, right? So when you say the potential risks of making mistake in software project, your risk that you're managing is engineers not being allowed to make mistakes.
Mhm.
That's the risk, right? So I also have a life coaching background here, so I see this a lot, especially when the question is phrased like this. And this is coming from a well-meaning place. I need to give credit. I need to give Eric credit here. Like this is coming from a very, very well-meaning place. Marty Kagan, again, mentioning him for the 5th time today, he does a lot of research on this, and he works with largest corporations. He works with largest businesses. And the number one problem is if your business requires strict management, if your business is control, predictability, then by definition, you will have zero experimentation and zero innovation, which means that you are at a very, very high risk of being run out of business by a smaller, more innovative competitor. And it's possible that that's unlikely to happen for you due to the nature of your business. You might have strong contracts, a strong monopoly of some kind. You might have a niche market, and you're just not concerned about that. And that's just something nice to have on the side for your business, and it works. And you shouldn't be really making any large changes. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is that you have no idea what you're doing, and you're not learning from your experiments here. Everything you're doing is an experiment, but nobody is verifying them. You're not finishing them. Run an experiment. An experiment looks like this. You usually don't manage the process. You say, I have a hypothesis. I think if we do X, numbers will go up by this much. The numbers are this much right now. I'm measuring them by doing X, Y, and Z. So for example, if I have this on my checkout, the conversion rates are 5%. My hypothesis is that if we add this to the checkout, conversion rates will go up by 3%, from 5 to 7, but from 5 to 8. That's an experiment. Now it's really important. You let the engineers do whatever is necessary to verify, to give that experiment a fair chance. And if you need to figure out what is the necessary timeline to get enough data to really see if you made a difference, now you need to check two things. A, did you prove that it went up? That's one thing. Second thing, did you happen to accidentally prove that it had the opposite effect? If we do X, it actually confirmed, guarantees that conversions will be lower. That's also valuable information, because then you can add to your architecture decision records, hey, never do this, because we've proven that this reduces, right? And you might find these kinds of things in your system where a failed experiment is useless to the team, but it might give some other team a valuable insight of, hey, when we did this, it actually proved that it lowers our conversions. I think you're doing it accidentally over there in your other product. That's also very valuable. And then when the product finishes, when the experiment finishes, if you don't want to keep the negative side or the no change data, you need to decide to remove the experiment. So if you add a silly feature to the code base and you run the experiment and you're not happy with the results, please remove it. That's how you do experiments, right? And the important aspect here is that the engineering team who owns the experiment should own the entire process of data gathering. They should understand the data. They should work with the marketing people who requested the experiment. They should work with the person who controls the hypothesis. They should understand the nuance and the detail of what goes into controlling it, into verifying whether the data is enough and how the data is collected. That should all happen within one team, within just a few skulls, a few human people with maybe a little bit of AI assistance to really run an experiment. If you need 20 people to run an experiment, you're in a control-obsessed organization, and you should probably not be running experiments until you address somebody's need for certainty and predictability higher up the chain of command.
Okay, but you have explained now how to do experiments. The question was more how to balance experiments with doing not experiments because you are afraid to do so because you might fail.
Well, fair. So let me try to...
Okay, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Try to make it...
Well, to make a case for balancing it, I think balancing it would imply that you're doing something mainstream and this is then something on the side.
Mhm.
Well, it should serve whatever you're doing on as a mainstream.
Mhm.
Please, if you're a startup, hang on, I can check Eric's account. Eric, what do you do? What do you do? You're in
You get scanned
You're in the-
right now.
you're in the TDD group. I don't know what you're doing. I can't tell really quickly from your LinkedIn page what it is. You have some APIs. You're in C#, agile development. I think if you're building software, you should really be focusing on. The team should be focusing on one goal. So resist the temptation of doing an experiment while the team is working on something important. Try to monotask an experiment. Interrupt feature development and do feature development by experimentation. Adopt experimentation culture. Don't do experimentation as somebody's side project along the main project. That's my take on balance. Don't balance it. Do one or the other. Do 1 week of feature development, release it, deploy it, and while you're waiting for feedback, do an experiment. Release it, deploy it, verify that it didn't in some way taint the data, and keep doing that. But generally, experimentation is not about people not making mistakes. You want mistakes. You want to control that. You want to foster an environment where engineers can do mistakes and learn from their mistakes and own their mistakes without being judged, without being attributed blame, but also by having engineering support and system support where people can say, hey, we made a mistake, we tried a feature, this is what the data produced, without any screaming going on. We did an experiment on a low volume day and it caused a small outage.
Yeah.
People should be able to have psychological safety to say, hey, we made a mistake. If you're seeing a lack of psychological safety and you want to run experiments in such a way that people don't do mistakes, there's no experimentation going on. Because if something goes wrong...
Quickly, what is the idea of experimentation? Business is never a horizontal thing. It is always something where we try to get more, because just to survive, you need to get better. So this is basically a rule of nature. So you can't stay the same, you can't stagnate. You need to become better. What are you going to do? So becoming better is not a linear process either. So you need to do something every time to change something in order to become better. And successful companies learned how to find the right things to do in order to become successful. But especially large companies waste the majority of their money on failures to get to the successful things, which is the reason why they can progress quite fast, while smaller companies have struggled with that because they don't have the budget to try so much. This is the question, the reason for the actual question, how to balance this. But you always need to rethink or to think about the actual idea of making business is to become better. And to become better, I need to find new ways to become better. And I do that by experiment. Because if I can just buy a book for myself or listen to some guy streaming all day long and then telling me you should do this is not an experiment. This is just, doing something, but you don't have proof that this is actually good for your context. In order to make sure that this is working for your context, you need to start an experiment for yourself.
So whenever you see us telling you that, hey, maybe this would work, the point is that we have tried it and it worked for us. And now it's your job to run an experiment to see, okay, does the advice make sense in your stack? Does the advice make sense in your organization? What do you need? What about our advice do you need to adapt to make it more profitable for your business, for your context, for your environment? Right? So experimentation is always about you trying to answer a question. If you don't have any questions, then you can't run experiments. You can't run innovation. Right? So maybe you don't have plausible questions because you don't know where to look. Doing experiments won't change anything. I've seen startups, especially, that are cost-center driven, do this octopus strategy. We don't know what works, so let's do 20 different things at the same time. Please, that waste of time. Waste of time. This sort of adopting this sort of VC unicorn strategy to internal product engineering, where, well, one of the features will be really good, right? So let's do 100 of them in parallel, and then one of them will make up for it. No, that's La La Land. The team has to drive continuity. The brains in the team have to say, I have seen and tried these 100 things. They all failed, and this is now what I learned. Now I know how to build.
Between gambling and experimentation.
Actually. Exactly. You don't want to play Russian roulette with your product. What you want to be doing is doing controlled experiments where the people doing the experiments is A, the entire team, and B, there is constantly a consensus, a quorum about what did we learn. We collectively, what did we learn, and share that, and then bring that on to the next experiment. If you lose data on the experiments, it's like, did the experiment work? I don't know, but we stopped it. That's useless. That's a waste of time. That's no source of innovation. Innovation, where does innovation come from? Last week's stream, innovation comes from empowered engineering teams who have shown evidence of product leadership making spontaneous decisions to act on user feedback.
Yep.
That's where innovation comes from. You can't control this. If your engineering team does not have evidence of showing product leadership, there's going to be no innovation. Because innovation happens by somebody on the team saying, oh, you know what? I went to talk to the customer. I've seen how they use the app. We were so far off. Like, they have a huge problem on the login screen, and then they get redirected in a weird way, and they do some crazy things to get around that. That's where innovation comes from. By autonomous product leadership happening in a tightly knit group that is immediately adjacent to the customer. That's how you get innovation. If you don't have that, never mind trying to control experiments like you would a project. Just foster more product leadership inside the team. Whoever is calling this, stop assigning tickets, stop making backlogs, stop doing 3-month roadmaps, adopt continuous delivery, get the main decision makers into the team, allow the team to prioritize their own work, allow the team to pull work, and they will start innovating on their own. And then give them a budget for that, and then hold them accountable to decisions that were clumsy and unprofessional, rather than just doing an experiment that failed. And then really be fair and thorough in how you reward and incentivize or prevent the really bad scenarios from happening. That's my take.
Okay. Raul just said one of our jobs as software engineers is to push for refactoring with stakeholders. So we should feel free, not scared about raising the situation. My mentor taught me that sometimes clients get complex. Yeah. So actually, this is something goes into the similar direction. It's just not exactly about experimenting, but refactoring is some form of preparing for, let's say, for the next things to come, that you stay agile. So actually that you stay, that you can move, right? That you can move forward, actually. And this is something you should do, even especially when it gets complex. You should do that, because otherwise you stand still in some month, and this is another problem.
Yeah, I think what's worth mentioning is that not all of your C-suite, not all of your stakeholders, not all of your senior management are customers for your project. So the extreme programming community and the agile community, the Scrum community, has a very specific definition for the word customer. The customer is the person who has requested the project, who is ultimately responsible for the business outcomes of the project. Refactor with that person. But if the project is this conglomerate of the CEO has to approve it, the CFO has to award the budget, the blah, 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 blah. Obviously, don't go refactoring with all those people. But really understand who is the product leader here? Who is the person most involved with having their political influence be challenged? Maybe they have some social credit to lose if the project goes badly. Maybe they are personally attached to the project and it's really important to them. I was once in agencies. I worked in agencies early on in my career when I had, we got a client through a co-worker's referral, and I was a junior leader being coached into becoming a team lead by my boss. And I had an engineering manager who was our sales representative. So I was suddenly in the situation of there were 3 very senior people who had a lot to lose if we fuck up this project. And I had no idea who's running the show. Because everybody had stake on the table, but nobody was acting like the customer. Nobody was acting like they had final responsibility
on the
for the
table
project.
or stake on the table?
They had money on the table, right? So they had lent money to be played with,
Because I'm
but they were
hungry
not.
right now. This
But
is
they were
really
not
annoying.
responsible. They were not accountable for the decisions being made. And because we didn't make it clear who's finally accountable to the decisions being made, all of those people who put money into the project would then basically had control over the wish list of the backlog, and that project went to shit. Right? So when you use the word stakeholders, and if you want to push for refactoring with stakeholders, make sure it's the person who is accountable for the business success of the project, who is possibly non-technical, but not with all the entire C-suite, because there are people who don't care about the project. They're just people who want to have projects happening in the future, have a stable company, manage the assets of the company, and then there's like one person who's showing product leadership potential. There's a lot of people who have product in their title, and they're not very good product leaders. Maybe they're just talking to customers, but they don't actually know how to create products. Maybe they don't know how to run experiments, right? So it's all there. But there is usually somebody in your organization who does that. You're very welcome, Eric, and Raul, and Anjani, and everybody else who's with us here today. Give us a little wave if you're here and chat works. I have to go, so I would like to sign off in the next 60 seconds. This was a delightful conversation. Tomorrow we're continuing the sort of broken window effect by working hands-on in your code base. So in the PWA code base, we will pair on sort of, I don't know exactly where we start, but I think we can go back to where we were tinkering last week and then figure out, okay, where did this sort of friction happen? Where did the really big depth come from? What do we want to do in the future that might make sense refactoring now? To demonstrate how to work in a legacy code base. And I will do the coding because I know nothing about the project, so I will have really stupid questions that will help us drive working in a legacy environment.
Let's take a look how we do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Good. So I would like to do a little wrap up about the topic, and I just try to keep it short. It is the broken window effect. So we just discussed the broken window effect in software development. The broken window effect is about once you take shortcuts, once you don't aim for quality anymore, it will stack up over time. It will become more likely that next time the same happen again. And what you build is basically a problematic state. You create something which doesn't, or you are not able to actually meet qualities anymore. And you run into a situation of, let's say, a dire situation. What you do is actually, you get into something you can't revert anymore. You will run into, let's say, follow-up problems and side effects you can't control. And this is something no one can predict. But it is definitely that it will happen on some point, somehow in time. You can't prevent that. And it's basically the opposite of refactoring. It is the opposite of trying to continuously deliver things, because what you do is taking away the capability of doing so. Because what you actually do is try to meet the next deadline, meet the next deadline, meet the next deadline.
Yeah.
And as we learned today, most of the times deadlines are actually no deadlines because they are badly communicated milestones. This is what this is. So there are clients of clients of clients who, you are the last in this chain, and you need to fulfill things. And then you take those shortcuts and you run into those problems, and you stack up those problems. You can't test really anymore. You will get problems. You will get more problems, and they will blame you. And this is what we shall understand about this broken window effect. We must be aware of that every shortcut we take, every to-do we put into place instead of fixing it right now, is a broken window. And the next one who's seeing this was thinking, oh, I can do the same. And you already lose. Or basically you have lost in that moment. So just take that for today. So that was, I think, a very short wrap up. I will definitely upload this session to the blog as the podcast version, and I will do some clips because there was quite interesting parts, I would say.
We need the rant clipped.
The rant was.
I mean, the rant clipped. I just want to finish up with an analogy. So the broken window effect is about when you take shortcuts, you show evidence of making bad decisions. And it's very likely that your bad decisions will continue in the future. If you make good decisions, you show evidence that your good decisions will continue in the future. So the broken window effect is about this disconnect between, I promise I will make good things in the future, but right now I'm choosing to make bad decisions, which means that the next time I have to make this decision, I will be working with a handicap. If you play chess, this is a very good example in chess, but also poker. There's usually in chess.com, there's a bar which says who's winning. And the game optimal way of playing chess is to keep the bar neutral. Right? So you want to play game optimal because you're waiting for the opponent to make a mistake. Right? So you're playing game optimal until an opportunity shows itself or the market jumps at you and you create this really good accidental benefit and then you are ready to act on it. Working with the broken window effect where you say, oh no, let's just cut some corners here, let's adopt some technical depth. It's like sacrificing a piece in chess and then not taking advantage of it. And then the bar is not at 0, it goes to -2 and -4 and -6 and -7. And then people come to us and then say, Dennis, I'm at -20. What is now my game optimal move? And I tell them, well, your game optimal move is to make sure it's -20 next week as well. Because you've shown evidence that you're on a trend where every week you sacrifice a piece. So we need to stop that. But the game optimal move is not suddenly, flipping the company around and it's going to be +20 next week. So that's really hard because a lot of business owners just, life sucks right now. I want to go back. And maybe going back is not available in a short amount of time. It might take just as much time to get back from the broken window effect as it did to get down. And the longer you wait, exponentially the longer it will take to get back to stability. So if you have evidence of doing broken window trade-offs in your company, your immediate strategy is to keep it neutral and stable for at least a month to stop making bad decisions. And then you increase the quality.
That's great. Last, that was actually in the quote of the blog post about broken window effect. Tolerating minor disorder leads to more serious crime and social decay, and this is what we should not tolerate. Not hitting qualities and let's say tricking ourselves, fooling ourselves. This is what you actually do. You hit yourself. Into the face, and you think it's a good idea to meet.
It's the social decay that kills engineering organizations, not the code.
Yeah, this is when actually fellowships happen. This is why I'm ranting so much about that. Yeah. It is I don't want to start again, but you will hear that more often.
We've all seen it. People get pushed into a corner, and people do weird shit when pushed into a corner. Exactly. And then if their salaries are on the line, and if they're forced to do so, and if they don't want to quit and don't want to lose their job, I've seen some stupid things being done.
Get away the disconnection between business and engineering.
Yeah.
Become an engineer instead of just a craftsman.
Find your GoPro
add to the
moment.
business, become a business engineer, and work together with the business people. This is what you can do as software people to work on this.
Try to understand the other side and work with their constraints rather than trying to fight them.
Exactly. So not just saying that, hey, blaming them for not respecting you or something like that. Make sure that you do everything in your power and then
Yeah.
try to take a look what others do. Don't say the others need to do first. I don't move. I just no.
A bit
This is
of-
not professional doing. I think.
A bit of life coaching advice. You can't show appreciation or support to somebody whom you're judging.
Yeah. I think we should shut down now because we don't stop anyway. Because numbers are going up again. Audience is
Stop.
growing.
Stop. Go doom scroll on TikTok or something.
Go watch Netflix now. It's time for procrastination. You get back tomorrow, 4 p.m. CET, same time. You are here and it's
No, actually, no. Let's not end on Netflix. So there's a new AI that just popped up, which is amazing. And here's a few links. So do you know what the new AI's name is? Something D? AI. So we got a new AI that came out. It's called, what is it called? You saw it, no? Today?
Me?
What is it called? What is its name?
I don't know what you mean.
So
Someone is
Devin.
following.
So Devin just came out. If you Google for Devin, Devin's a new AI that's apparently able to self-prompt and learn about an engineering problem. So it's not your co-pilot. It's basically the pilot version of engineering. And there's also Boba AI, boba-ai.com. Boba AI is an experiment that ThoughtWorks is running, and they are building an LLM for product leadership, how to write tickets, how to describe business problems. So if you're into AI and if you want to learn something new, and if you think you have a broken window problem and you sort of need a fresh perspective, and you really don't want to watch Netflix right now, there's a few videos on Boba, there's a few videos on Devin. Maybe educate yourselves with some light entertainment. It's super experimental, so, there's no guarantees here, that has to be said. But I'm curious what you come up with. Thank you for being with us today.
Yep. See you tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Let's try to get. Okay.
A little bit of elevator music. We'll see you tomorrow. For part, the screen, I think, mostly be React and TypeScript, and it will be mostly a non-front-end developer asking silly questions, which is me. So,
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening and being with us today. See you tomorrow. And
thank you for your support.
yeah. And we are just showing 1 or 2 clips now if you're interested into from former sessions with guests. So feel free to stay for some more minutes, and we see us tomorrow then. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Good night.
Good night. So are you doing that or me?
You're doing it. I have to go.
We have
Bedtime
a
with the kiddos.
waffle overlay?
Yeah, because sometimes you waffle on for forever, and I added a waffle overlay because you're waffling. So.
Okay, everyone. So let's
Thanks.
start with Richard because we talked about burnout today. So see you, everyone. What is actually well-being then for software professionals? So why are we going to talk about that? Richard, can you take the word and talk a little bit about your experience and why this is a big topic we should all take care of?
Yeah, so I think interestingly for me, I've always been physically active. So well-being used to mean to me just physical health, right? And so I've always thought, yeah, I've got that down. I've always gone to the gym. I've played football. I've played squash. I've done running. So that's always been something that's there. And actually, only later in my career did I realize how much that was helping me along the way. But I wasn't doing it deliberately. I wasn't doing it for that purpose. And I hadn't connected the dots. Reflecting more on my career and some of my challenges and trying to piece it all together, and thinking a bit more about the mindset, about mental health and all of that kind of stuff, I realized well-being is much broader than just your physical health. And I think one of the biggest the most interesting things about well-being is that it's very individualistic, and so that is, it's good and it's bad in a sense, because the fact that it's so individualistic means that we can't just put a single label on it. So we can't say to everyone, this is well-being and you've got it or you don't. And so for some people that's hard and it's complicated. On the flip side, it's actually really good for us, because well-being means different things to different people, and we decide what being means to us, and that's super important. And it touches, it's very closely linked to a big part of what we're talking about here, which is responsibility. And almost the first part of our responsibility is to define and to recognize what being means to us. And so just broad stroke, that's your physical health, your mental health, feeling safe in the environment that you find yourself in, and feeling safe being social with people as well. And yeah, that's a broad thing, and those different things mean different things to different people, and it's finding your mix of those and then branching out to the things that contribute positively to them, which can also be completely different for different people. So suddenly everything's thrown legs, and it's huge.
For me, it's very insightful to hear what is going on, like the different opinions, the questions of the public, for sure. And I do learn a lot from this. I love chatting around, and I think, yeah, more juniors should be involved in all of this. They shouldn't be that scared of talking about these topics or reading about these topics, because it's not only, as I said before, for seniors or architects. Of course, they might be implementing, but you're going to use it every day. So you might as well really learn what's up.
There's two kinds of one thing. Number one, there's the engineering feedback, right?
Okay.
I'm going to deliver this change today to find out if it breaks it. And then there's the business feedback. I'm going to deliver the smallest slice of this next feature to find out if it's valuable, and deliver that and get feedback. But
Figure out if it's safe to merge and whether it's safe to continue with these requirements.
yeah,
That's all.
just because it passes all the tests doesn't mean that it doesn't break something in production once it finally gets to a production environment. I try to have a high level of confidence, but we're never 100% sure.
Yeah.
And so we want to get feedback as rapidly as possible on the engineering thing. People tell me there's no value in delivering anything until it's feature complete. No. I know it's stable. I want to make sure we're on the right track. I don't want to invest too much money in this idea. I don't want to assume my idea is correct. I want to assume my idea is incorrect. It's a scientific experiment. I'm trying to invalidate the hypothesis. And we should be ecstatic when it's successful and just accept when it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we change course to chase the value instead of just assuming value?
I would like to add something to the term of confidence. I think confidence doesn't mean that you are 100%, as you said, 100% safe to deploy. It's about to be confident that you can handle a situation even if something happened, but you expect feedback. So what you definitely get is feedback. And if the feedback is a negative, you can react quickly on that. So this is confidence. It's not about, I'm 100% sure that nothing will happen. I think this is a big misconception.
No, I agree. And people focus on the wrong thing. I want to make sure that everything is perfect before we deliver. That's the wrong thing.